Han Li's Wuxia Adventures. Chapter 2209. Ha ha ha. The sect master of the Six Sons sect, Qin Guang, walked over with a few Six Sons sect disciples. When he saw Prince Mo from afar, he hurriedly went forward to greet him. "Your Highness, it's an honor to meet you." Prince Mo nodded at him indifferently. Sect Master Qin Guang's bald head was extremely dazzling under the setting sun. The middle-aged man who was a few steps away from him had an ordinary appearance, but his voice was loud and clear. "I'm Wuxia from the Heavenly Fortune sect. Greetings, Your Highness." Wu Jin followed behind his father with a complicated expression. He looked at Mo Lian and Arbor with a strange expression. These two people had left a deep impression on him in Liang Yuan medicine store. Those people from Hongyuan Island had suffered greatly in the hands of this couple. He would never forget Madame Zhang's strange expression before she died. So these two people were the Crown Prince and Crown Princess from the Divine Land. It was no wonder that people with such prominent identities were so ruthless and weren't afraid of causing trouble at all. Wu Jin also abruptly turned his head. Sure enough, he saw Zhang Wuxiang, who was standing half a step behind him, glaring furiously at Xiao Mu. Wu Jin was about to remind young Mistress Zhang when he saw the scene in the pigsty. His eyes widened, and the hair on his head almost exploded. "Oh, Master Tian, the one who was locked in the pigsty and running around in circles, wasn't that the unlucky Prince of Giant Pain himself?" Everyone's eyes couldn't help but twitch. The Crown Prince of the Giant Pain Wang family was so unlucky. At this moment, he was running back and forth in the inner circle like a madman, gasping for breath. The scariest thing was that there were 10 running pigs behind him. Everyone looked at each other in silence with a strange expression. They were all stunned. What was going on with the Crown Prince of Giant Pain? Mo Kuan ran until he was half dead. He only felt that the herd of pigs running behind him was very scary. He felt that if he dared to stop, he would probably be torn apart by the pigs in the next second. "Your Highness, Your Highness." Qin Guang hastily walked forward and called out loudly. He looked on helplessly as the Crown Prince of Giant Pain ran past in front of him. The head of the Heavenly Fortune sect, Wuxia, hurriedly turned around and hurriedly bowed towards Mo Lian. "Your Highness, I don't know if there's some misunderstanding between the heir and myself. What are you doing?" Prince Mo glanced at him indifferently. "What do you know?" "The Crown Princess is giving you a gift in return." Mo Lian swept a glance at Wuxia, who was making a fuss over nothing and hadn't seen the world. He couldn't help but sneer in his heart. Ah! Ah! The Crown Prince of Giant Pain was scared out of his wits by the herd of pigs. He leaped up, wanting to leap up. Unexpectedly, his body was just suspended in midair when he was struck down by a tyrannical air current. He almost slipped into the herd of pigs. He hastily used his 2 hands to cling onto the fence, hanging onto it. He shrieked, "No, don't. Let me out. Little cousin-in-law, hurry and let me out. Cousin. Xiao Mu walked up a few steps and icily said with a stoic face, "What? You don't like the gift I'm giving you in return? Who the hell would like this kind of gift?" Mo Kuan was ravaged to the point of tears and snot overflowing. His hands clung onto the fence tightly, refusing to let go. He didn't want to talk about his image anymore. Chapter 2210. His entire body was hanging from the door, and his 2 legs couldn't help but curl upwards. At this moment, he could only feel the herd of pigs circling around his feet, as if he lowered his feet by half an inch, those pigs would gnaw on both his legs. It was too terrifying. Mo Kuan kept crying as he said, "Let me out, little cousin-in-law. What did I do wrong for you to treat me like this? Let me out." Arbor couldn't help but be enraged when he heard that. "You don't like my return gift?" Mo Kuan was just about to nod when he caught sight of Arbor's icy gaze. His heart trembled, and he hurriedly shook his head. I like it, I like it. Ah, no, no. It's me, little cousin-in-law. Wah. Mo Kuan was in tears. His legs that were hanging from the door kept kicking upwards, and he was so scared that he pissed his pants, his face drained of color. Arbor glanced at him coldly and asked leisurely, "Are you still going to give the crown prince a gift later?" "No, I won't, I won't." Mo Kuan had already pissed his pants. Don't freaking talk about giving a gift. He wouldn't give anything. Would he still dare to give a gift? Didn't he just give His Highness the Crown Prince a bunch of flirtatious beauties? In the end, the Crown Princess gave him a bunch of old sows as a return gift. This gift was really unique. It was completely different from anyone else's return gift. Arbor nodded when he heard that. He glanced at a guard beside him and took out a thin piece of paper from his inner world. "Sign it for him." That guard's mouth twitched, and he hurriedly took the pen and paper with both hands. He turned and walked quickly to Mo Kuan, who was still clinging to the door. He handed the pen and paper to Mo Kuan. Mo Kuan wasn't in the mood to read at this moment. He hurriedly reached out to sign it after receiving it, and he cried out tearfully, "Little cousin-in-law, Crown Princess, hurry and let me go, Crown Princess." He had agreed to everything, signed the paper, and even apologized repeatedly. What was this devilish Crown Princess waiting for? Why didn't they let him go? Arbor reached out and took the thing he signed. After looking at it, he nodded and raised his hand to shake the thin piece of paper in his hand. "Remember what you've signed." Xiao Mu stated coldly, "In the future, if there are still people who want to gift this and that to the Crown Prince, this Crown Prince Consort guarantees that the return gift I will give you will definitely satisfy all of you and satisfy all of you." Everyone! Was the Crown Princess venting her anger on the Crown Prince of Giant Pain? Arbor then turned around and stomped back to Mo Lien's side. Mo Lien smiled and reached out to hold her little hand. She turned around and let her out. "Are you happy now, Jojo?" If he did not let the little guy vent his anger, the one who would be in trouble would be him. Thank the heavens, thank the Crown Prince of Giant Pain. This time, the little fellow should be able to calm down. As expected, the expression on Miss Chiao's face eased a little, and she nodded reluctantly. "Weakling, I don't even have the desire to teach him a lesson." The Crown Prince, seeing the two of them walk out hand in hand, the steward and the others didn't dare to stop them. After the two of them walked a little further away, the steward hurriedly called Biao to come forward and rescue his master from the gate with tears in his eyes. At this moment, the Crown Prince of Giant Pain was already paralyzed on the ground. His legs were trembling non-stop, and he even wet his pants from fright. Classmate Dun Zong, who had been watching the show the entire time, was speechless. The little girl was indeed incomparably ferocious. Seeing how she scared the Crown Prince of Giant Pain into a dog, as a bystander, he felt a little satisfied. "I'm going to sleep, and everything will return to normal tomorrow." Chapter 22:11. Dun Zhu pretended to show concern. "How are you feeling?" Crown Prince Giant Pain. "Cough, if you're not feeling well, don't force yourself. Quickly help the Crown Prince back to his room." Sect Master Qin Guang of Six Sons Sect turned back to look at the Crown Prince's back with a complicated expression. This Crown Prince actually did such a thing to his own cousin in front of so many family heads. He didn't give them any face at all. It was obvious that he wasn't someone who was easy to get along with. However, it made sense. The Crown Prince of the Divine Province was there. Crown Prince Giant Pain must have had nothing better to do to go against him. In the end, not only did he almost lose his life, he also lost all his face in front of everyone. All the family heads stood there awkwardly. They didn't know if they should escape immediately or continue to be a part of the background. Dun Zhu still went forward and reached out with a smile to help the embarrassed Crown Prince Giant Pain up. Crown Prince Giant Pain, are you alright? Do I look like I'm alright? Crown Prince Giant Pain suddenly roared. He was in a crazy state now, and he didn't even care about Dun Zhu and the others. He just wanted to shout out all the anger in his chest. The volume of his voice was so loud that it scared the surrounding family heads, and they all frowned and took a few steps back. Crown Prince Giant Pain supported his manservant, Biao, and stood up shakily. He felt that his legs were still trembling uncontrollably. Mo Kuan shouted sternly, Mo Lien, Arbor, I won't let you off. This matter couldn't end like this. Mo Lien, that fellow, condoned his wife to treat him like this. He must report him to royal father. Damn Mo Lien, damn Arbor, this black-hearted couple. He definitely wouldn't let them off. Crown Prince Giant Pain. Biao said with a mournful face. His Highness the Crown Prince isn't easy to deal with. Let's return to the Divine Province first. The Crown Prince of Giant Pain retracted his hand and gave him a slap. He shrieked in exasperation, shut up. Biao covered his face and took a few steps back in fear. The Crown Prince of Giant Pain pointed at the sky and cursed, you will pay the price for this. Oh, what's the price? A cold voice came from outside the crowd. Mo Kuan simply didn't expect that Mo Lien and Xiao Mu, this black-hearted pair, would actually return and appear before them again at this time. Mo Kuan was so scared that he pissed his pants on the spot. He quickly pushed the butler and Biao in front of him as a shield. He shrunk behind the butler and Biao, only popping out half of his head as he screamed, You guys, what else do you want? I'm warning you, don't do anything stupid. Don't act recklessly. Mo Kuan raised his voice and let out a series of dying duck cries. Arbor walked up to Mo Kuan expressionlessly and hooked his little finger at him. What are you doing? Mo Kuan's nerves tensed up. He hugged the butler's waist tightly and refused to let go. The old housekeeper's face turned a little green. His waist was in pain from the Crown Prince's tight grip. Bring him here. At Xiao Mu's command, several royal guards immediately swarmed forward and pinned Mo Kuan's hands behind his back without a care, escorting him to Xiao Mu. Mo Kuan's eyes widened in horror. What did you do to me? Chapter 22:12. From the moment he entered the pigsty just now, he already realized that he could not muster any spiritual energy in his body, much less leap up. Even escaping seemed so difficult. Mo Kuan was too scared. At that moment, he only felt that he was so insignificant in this world, so weak that he was comparable to a tiny ant. It was as if the other party only needed to stomp on him and flatten him. Little cousin-in-law, I was wrong. I know that I was wrong. Don't make things difficult for me, alright? I will definitely not send beautiful women to cousin-in-law in the future. Mo Kuan's tears streamed down his face as he looked at Arbor with a frightened expression. Whoever sent beautiful women to the Crown Prince would be a big idiot. What kind of Hedong lioness did the Crown Prince marry? Look, he only sent over a dozen beautiful women, and she could not even tolerate it. Shut up. Arbor angrily slapped him heavily on the shoulder. That lad immediately fell to the ground with a plop like a soft-footed prawn. Arbor forcefully grabbed one of his arms and pulled with all her might. Mo Kuan screamed like a pig being slaughtered. He only felt that his entire arm was being pinched in someone's palm and was being held behind his back. It was extremely painful. What are you screaming for? Arbor impatiently slapped the back of his neck forcefully. Shut up. Mo Kuan's voice became softer, and he sobbed. He only wanted to go home and hug his father to cry properly. The Crown Prince's wife was too fierce. With this kind of personality, which man could stand it? Break, Crown Princess, break, sob. Mo Kuan only felt that his entire arm did not seem to belong to him anymore. The pain of being held behind his back kept surging in his heart. Arbor forcefully shook the arm that was holding Mo Kuan. Gulp. A small box suddenly rolled out of Mo Kuan's sleeve and landed on the ground. Arbor stretched out her leg and kicked the box, causing it to fly up and land in her hands. Ah, this is. Crown Princess, you can't snatch mine. Pa. Without another word, Arbor swept his sleeve across Mo Kuan's face. Mo Kuan's head fell to the ground with a thud. Arbor tossed the box in his hand and glanced at the person lying on the ground with disdain. You can find trouble with me at any time. But it's best to be prepared for a short life. The little fellow threw the box into his inner world, snorted, and walked to the Crown Prince's side without looking back. Mo Lien helplessly reached out to hold her little hand. What's in that box? It turned out that the reason why the little fellow had dragged him back was because of this box in Mo Kuan's sleeve. Chocho said this is a snow ginseng fruit seed. The little fellow cast a glance at Mo Lien, who was lying on the ground, then looked up at Mo Lien and said, I'll plant it for you to eat. Mo Lien nodded. Is it delicious? Yes. Miss Chiao nodded her small head. It's even more delicious than the winter fruit. If ordinary people eat it regularly, it can also prolong their life. When it's grandmother's birthday, we can go home and give it to her. Okay. Mo Lien grinned and patted her little head. The young couple held hands and were really going to leave this time. Zhang Wuxiang, who was standing at the side, looked slightly agitated. Just as she was about to move, Wu Jini, who was paying close attention to her movements, reached out and pulled her back. Wu Jini also lowered his voice and asked Zhang Wuxiang, what are you doing? This slut killed my mother. Shouldn't I kill her for revenge? Chapter 22:13. Why don't you wait 2 more days until the people from Great Source Island arrive? Wu Jini frowned. You'll only be humiliating yourself if you rush up now. Zhang Wuxiang recalled Arbor and Mo Lien's skills and couldn't help but feel a little discouraged. Although Wu Jini was a useless coward, he was still quite smart. What he said wasn't wrong. If she rushed out to settle the score with Arbor and his wife now, she definitely wouldn't be able to get anything out of it. Zhang Wuxiang stopped in her tracks indignantly. She glared hatefully at Arbor and his wife's backs as she reluctantly watched them leave. The Crown Prince of Giant Pain, who had been ravaged, once again lost all the strength in his body and collapsed on the ground. Ah Biao hurriedly crawled forward and reached out to help him up. Prince. Prince. Return to the Divine Prefecture. Return to the Divine Prefecture immediately. Prince of Giant Pain was so angry that his lips trembled and his entire body trembled. He wanted to return to the Divine Prefecture immediately to find his biological father. He didn't want to continue staying in this damned place any longer. He wanted to find his father. He wanted to return to the Divine Prefecture. Biao nodded repeatedly. Yes, yes, yes. It's just that we have to wait 2 more days before we can leave through that special passage. Return immediately. Prince of Giant Pain screamed. The Heavenly Fortune sect master, Wu Nyozi, twitched his eyes and couldn't help but say, Prince is tired. You'd better help him back to his room to rest. The Crown Prince of Giant Pain's eyes suddenly widened as if he wanted to eat someone. His gaze circled Wu Nyozi, Qin Guang, and the others, and he shrieked, You, why are you all here? His disgraceful appearance just now and when he was forced to kneel on the ground by the Crown Princess, they saw all of it. Only then did Prince of Giant Pain come back to his senses and realize that the patriarchs and elite disciples of Shantian Prefecture's aristocratic families were all gathered here. Qin Guang hurriedly cupped his hands and smiled apologetically. Prince, Qin Guang will take his leave first. Farewell. Farewell. The patriarchs cupped their hands and bowed. Then, they hurriedly led their disciples out of the hall. The crown prince of Giant Pain's furious roar came from behind. Who is it? Who brought them all here? Who is it? Regardless of how hysterical the crown prince of Giant Pain was, Arbor and Mo Lien walked out of the residence hand in hand, heading towards the inn they were staying at. Let's go buy a house. Arbor suddenly said, I think we should stay here for a few more days. It's not convenient to do things in the inn. Mo Lien's eyes lit up. She grabbed Arbor's hand and pressed it against her chest. Jojo, do you want to spend some time alone with me? You think too much. Arbor looked up at him and suddenly remembered what Fan Meng and Fan Yu had said that day. He tilted his head and thought for a while. Then, he flipped his hand and took out a pot of blooming ink-colored lotus from his inner world. You can have it. I planted it myself. Arbor said expressionlessly. Mo Lien reached out and took the lotus from her. He hugged it in his arms and looked at it again and again. He held it lovingly. Jojo, you're giving it to me? Arbor nodded. I planted it myself. There's only one of its kind in the world. Do you like it? Mo Lien nodded vigorously. I like it, I like it. Of course I like it very much. Xiao Mu beckoned at him with her small hand, indicating for him to bend down. Mo Lien blinked and leaned closer to her. What's wrong? Chapter 22:14. Miss Qiao suddenly reached out her hands and circled them around his neck. She pulled him down and kissed him hard on the cheek. Mo Lien, I like you. Alright, the confession was over. The gift had been given and the confession was over. Miss Qiao felt that she had completed an important task and nodded at herself satisfactorily. She then released her hand and turned around to walk away in small steps, not caring about the dazed His Highness the Crown Prince. At this moment, the two of them had just exited Prince Giant Pain's residence. There were quite a lot of people on the bustling street. The little fellow's voice was quite loud. So at this moment, the passers-by on the street were all looking at the two of them with strange gazes. Miss Qiao quickly squeezed into a small alley. She reached out a small fist and smashed it hard on her own head. Her brain was damaged. After the confession, she realized that she had actually made such an outlandish and bold action on a bustling street. It's over, it's over, it's over, it's all because this man was too alluring. She was so confused that she couldn't even think straight. Arbor reached out to cup her slightly hot little face and hesitated on the spot for a moment. Just as she was about to turn around and look for Mo Lien, she suddenly felt a strong gust of wind from behind her head, attacking the back of her neck with incomparable speed. Arbor's gaze turned cold. She quickly leaned to the side, her sleeves fluttering as she leaped onto the top of the wall with a whoosh. Her pair of cold eyes were suffused with a cold light as she stared coldly at the person below the wall. That person didn't manage to hit her in one strike and didn't say much to her. He directly took advantage of her and leaped up, aiming for her face. This speed. Arbor's heart slightly choked. She turned around and leaped, her long black hair gliding in a perfect arc in midair. After landing on the ground with a whoosh, Arbor rushed towards where Mo Lien was. However, two people quickly appeared in front of her and attacked her from the front and back, launching fierce attacks at her chest and back. The surging spiritual energy came straight at her. Just as the attack was about to land on her, Tong Jianjian's figure suddenly appeared beside Arbor. He crossed his arms to block the attack. Mo Lien, who had heard the news, immediately saw the strangers attacking Jojo. She narrowed her eyes and said angrily, "What are you doing?" When they saw him appear, they seemed to be slightly afraid and quickly exchanged glances with each other. Seeing that the group of people were about to retreat, Mo Lien rushed towards Jojo. He stretched out his arms but did not have time to catch his wife. Suddenly, he saw a large net being thrown down from the sky. Like catching a fish, it caught his Qiao in an instant. Without another word, it pulled her and quickly leaped up. A bird's cry came from the sky. Mo Lian's expression was furious. She raised her head and saw a huge strange bird dragging the net. It flapped its wings and flew up a few times before it completely disappeared. Little 7. Mo Lian shouted in exasperation. These people actually snatched away his wife right in front of his eyes. Mo Lian leaped onto the dragon's body. Taking Tong and the others, they quickly chased after the bird. After less than half an incense stick's time, the still air in the small alley once again rippled like water. The strange bird appeared in the air, and the net in its claws appeared. Qi Lianhai's expression was slightly gloomy as he appeared in the small alley again with his people. He beckoned with his hand and that strange bird dragging the net fell from the sky and landed in front of them. Qi Lianhai gazed coldly at Xiao Mu, who was inside the net, and gave her a sinister smile. It really wasn't easy to wait for you to be alone. Chapter 22:15. Arbor looked at him expressionlessly. Mo Lian was so worried that she was confused, and she was tricked by the middle-aged man in front of her. In fact, Qi Lianhai had only used an invisibility talisman on them to temporarily hide everyone's presence. But with Mo Lian's intelligence, she would probably return in less than a minute. So. Alright, take her away immediately. Qi Lianhai was a cautious person. Although he had tricked the crown prince of the divine province into leaving, he knew that he wouldn't be able to fool him for long. Qi Lianhai's subordinates all pointed their weapons at Arbor in the net, warning her not to act rashly. Qi Lianhai sneered. Don't worry, we don't want your life. We just want to ask the crown princess to come with us. Of course, you don't need to waste your energy trying to break this net. Qi Lianhai looked at her triumphantly. This net can not only block your spiritual energy in presence, but you should have noticed by now that you can't even use your spiritual sense. Arbor looked at him coldly. Take her away. At Qi Lianhai's order, the strange bird pulled up the net again and rushed into the sky. Qi Lianhai and the others quickly summoned their spiritual beast mounts and left with the strange bird. The group had only left for less than half a minute when Mo Lian's figure reappeared on the horizon. She returned to the alley where Arbor was taken away with Tong and the others. She stared gloomily at the empty alley and subconsciously clenched her fists. Was it Fang Su of the Greenwood Guard? Mo Lian asked angrily. Go. Gather all the hidden guards in Shuntian Prefecture and dig Fang Su out. With that, Mo Lian leaped onto Yan Qi's back again and had him chase after Arbor's presence. Lord Qi, we can't do it. She's too fast. A subordinate beside Qi Lianhai urgently reported. Qi Lianhai had also sensed Prince Mo's approach. He frowned and said, I've already blocked her presence. How did she catch up so quickly? Who are you? Arbor stood in the net, swaying left and right in the wind, but his face was still expressionless as he looked at Qi Lianhai. Qi Lianhai sneered, Crown Princess doesn't need to know who I am. All you need to know is that from today onwards, your good days are over. Really? Qi Lianhai smiled and opened a bottle of medicinal liquid in his hand. He quickly rushed to the red-beaked bird's side and fed it the entire bottle of medicinal liquid. The strange bird immediately let out a cry and flapped its wings even more vigorously. Its speed seemed to have more than doubled as it flew forward. Arbor looked at them coldly and sized up Qi Lianhai. I've never seen you before. You don't have to try to get information out of me. Qi Lianhai said with a smile, I was only ordered to bring you back. As for what will happen in the future, you'll have to pray for yourself. Xiao Mu leisurely swallowed a pill and stared at Qi Lianhai with a cold glint in her eyes. You think that victory is already in your grasp? What? Could it be that Crown Princess still has the strength to resist? Qi Lianhai smiled proudly at her. This sky cicada net of mine isn't some ordinary item. It's more than enough to trap a great spirit master, let alone a little spirit master like you. Arbor glanced at him. Chapter 22:16. A pair of claws were suddenly covered with a Vajra talisman. Like cutting vegetables and tofu, she stretched out her fingers and gently swiped at the net. Chi La, the originally smug Chi Lianhai, couldn't help but frown slightly. Chi La, after another tearing sound, Arbor directly drilled out of the net. She flipped over and landed on the back of the strange bird. Then, she slammed her fist down on its big head. Her punch, which was imbued with the Vajra talisman, immediately caused the strange bird to shriek. Its body plummeted to the ground like a cannonball, with its head facing down and its legs facing up. When it was 1 foot from the ground, Arbor's figure suddenly spun in a parabolic arc in the air and rushed up again with a whoosh. However, the strange bird landed heavily on the ground with a howl. Its skull came into close contact with the ground and smashed its skull into pieces on the spot. There was no possibility of treatment at all. Xiao Mu hovered in the air and coldly gazed at that large bird that had already died. She then turned around and looked at the dumbfounded Qi Lianhai with a spurious smile. Qi Lianhai! Exclamation point. He didn't expect the crown princess to come out so easily. That heavenly cicada net, was actually completely destroyed by this destructive woman in front of him. Ah! Qi Lianhai only felt like he was holding a breath in his heart. It was as if he couldn't spit it all out, and his entire chest felt uncomfortable. However, Arbor didn't wait for him to react and punched him hard in the stomach. Qi Lianhai couldn't resist this force. His whole body was beaten into the air, and his back hit several subordinates. Qi Lianhai's subordinates really exerted a Herculean effort to catch Qi Lianhai. Even so, they still carried Qi Lianhai's body and staggered back a few steps. After stabilizing his body with great difficulty, Qi Lianhai looked at Arbor angrily. He covered his painful stomach with one hand and shouted in a trembling voice, You! This damn little girl was trapped in the sky cicada net, and she actually had the strength to retaliate? He had really underestimated her. Arbor stretched out a small hand and waved a bronze plate in front of him. Qi Lianhai's expression changed, and he stretched out his hand to touch his waist. Sure enough, the copper plate that he had stuffed into his waist had actually disappeared at some unknown time. Arbor looked at the waist token over and over again, then raised his head to glance at Qi Lianhai. A cold smile faintly appeared on his lips. So, it's Ani Prefecture's personal attendant. I didn't expect you all to be in such a good mood, coming all the way from Ani Prefecture to Shantian Prefecture to catch me. Arbor swung his hand and threw Qi Lianhai's waist token back to him. Here you go. In any case, she had no use for it. Only Qi Lianhai and his group took this small token seriously. Jojo. When Arbor heard the Crown Prince's voice from afar, his eyes couldn't help but light up slightly. He turned his head and looked toward the sky. In the clear blue sky, the Crown Prince was moving over like a bolt of lightning. In no more than a moment, he suddenly stopped beside Arbor and reached out to pull her into a tight embrace that his heart finally settled down. He reached out to hug her and sighed softly. Jojo. Arbor reflexively reached out to stroke his chest. It's fine. Chapter 22:17. Mo Lien was truly a bit too horrified. It had only been a blink of an eye, yet his wife was almost kidnapped on the streets. No one would be able to bear this matter. A second ago, Jojo was still happily confessing to him with flowers, but the next second, she was almost kidnapped. It was already fortunate that the Crown Prince didn't lose his cool on the spot when he saw the little fellow being dragged away by that strange bird. Fortunately, he reacted in time and rushed back, allowing him to catch up with this group of people. Mo Lien raised her hand to rub Arbor's head. At this moment, she could still feel her heart thumping wildly. Husband, these people were sent by Ani Prefecture. Arbor glowered at Qi Lianhai. Ani Prefecture's people had also interfered in the destruction of the Holy Water sect. She hadn't even found the time to deal with them, but she didn't expect this group of people to deliver themselves to death first. Mo Lien flicked her sleeve and shot out a fire spirit, which heavily crashed into a man behind Qi Lianhai. Just now, it was that person who dragged the net and aimed a sharp blade at his Jojo's back. That man was caught off guard and was hit by the fire spirit. He flew several meters away and rolled twice when he landed with a bang. Qi Lianhai looked back and couldn't help but be secretly shocked by the Crown Prince's cultivation. The subordinates he brought were all spiritual cultivators level 7 and above, but they were like toys in the Crown Prince's hands. They didn't have the slightest ability to resist. Qi Lianhai's pupils contracted as he watched a stream of fire flash in front of him as fast as a gust of wind. Qi Lianhai shouted and activated his defensive barrier to block it. Unexpectedly, the Crown Prince's purple flame had an extremely strong impact. When it crashed into his chest, it was as if he had been struck by thousands of streaks of light, causing him to explode in pain. The defensive barrier simply couldn't withstand this flame and shattered on the spot. Qi Lianhai was also sent flying backward by this ferocious force. He crashed into the alley's wall behind him with a boom. How could that wall withstand this kind of force? It instantly shattered into pieces. Half of Qi Lianhai's body was buried in the ruins. He barely managed to prop himself up. His eyes were slightly frightened as he looked at the Crown Prince. This Crown Prince was actually able to insta-kill him, a grade 13 spirit master. Qi Lianhai hurriedly summoned his spirit beast, the spirit magpie, and struggled to jump onto the back of the spirit magpie. With a shout, he turned around and fled in panic. Roar! Unexpectedly, a dragon's roar came from the sky. Before Qi Lianhai could react, he felt an impact flying towards his face. How could he dodge in time? He was hit head-on in an instant. To be more precise, it was Little Seven's tail flick that sent it flying off the spirit magpie. As for the unlucky magpie, how could it dare to resist in front of the ancient golden dragon? It trembled for a long time before it was frightened by Shao Qi's roar. It folded its wings, closed its eyes, and fell to the ground with a thud, pretending to be dead. Little Seven circled around in the air. His body seemed to be covered in a layer of gold powder. Everywhere he went, there wasn't a lack of glittering gold folds. Qi Lianhai fell from the sky and landed headfirst on the ground with a "pa" sound. He landed headfirst on the broken mud wall of the small alley. His head was full of rubble and rubble. Xiao Mu calmly swept him a glance before tilting her small head and humping. Serves you right. You dared to catch Jojo and even said that Jojo wouldn't have a good life in the future. You're the one who won't have a good life. From now on, you'll be unlucky every minute. Chapter 22:18. Qi Lianhai struggled to crawl out of the mound and spat out a few mouthfuls of debris. His face contained traces of shame and anger as he stared at Mo Lien and Arbor. This was simply intolerable bullying. Qi Lianhai stumbled out of the ruins and glared hatefully at Mo Lien. You! Bang! Without waiting for him to finish, Mo Lien flicked her sleeve again and sent him flying, plunging headfirst into the mound of ruins. Qi Lianhai, who ate a big mouthful of dirt, was speechless. The heavens took pity on him. Why did he encounter this fiend? A warrior can be killed, but not humiliated. Qi Lianhai struggled to crawl out of the mound of ruins again and roared angrily, Prince Mo, you! Bang! Bang! Slap! Qi Lianhai, who had crawled out of the mound 7 or 8 times in a row, was thrown back in again by Prince Mo with a flick of his sleeve. After falling into the mound of dirt for the last time and eating a mouthful of debris, he no longer had the strength to struggle to get up. He simply lay in the mound of dirt and coughed a few times, choking his head, face, and mouth full of dirt. That taste was indescribably unpleasant. He had underestimated his opponent. Qi Lianhai clenched his fists tightly, unable to conceal the grief and shame in his heart. It was because he was overconfident that he faced this situation. However, at this moment, Qi Lianhai didn't even have the courage to crawl up again. He knew that at this moment, his courage had already been smashed away by Crown Prince Mo's successive strikes. The last bit of willpower he had left to struggle out had also been smashed away cleanly. He wanted to lie down like this until the end of time. Unfortunately, he didn't lie like this for long before his head was dragged out of the mound of ruins. Qi Lianhai felt like he was a chicken or duck waiting to be slaughtered, being dragged out and thrown heavily onto the ground. Tong Yi held his sword in one hand and stepped on his back. He squatted down and turned to ask the Crown Prince and Arbor, "Your Highness, should we take care of him immediately?" Mo Lien glanced at Qi Lianhai and shook her head. "Bring him here." Tong immediately dragged Qi Lianhai in front of the Crown Prince and unceremoniously threw Qi Lianhai on the ground like he was throwing trash. Mo Lien coldly glanced at Qi Lianhai. She suddenly reached out and sucked his head into her hand. Qi Lianhai's entire body trembled in fear. He already knew what this terrifying man in front of him wanted to do to him. Soul search. He wanted to search Qi Lianhai's soul. How could this be? "No, don't, Your Highness, please spare me. Your Highness, Does your master think that this prince is easy to bully?" Prince Mo slightly lowered his head and coldly looked at Qi Lianhai. "In your eyes, is this prince that easy to deal with?" No. Qi Lianhai was so terrified that he couldn't speak properly. His mind was so nervous that it was almost blank. How could he have the energy to think about what the Crown Prince was saying right now? He struggled strenuously in Prince Mo's hands and repeatedly shouted, "Your Highness, please calm your anger. Your Highness, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. This lowly one will definitely tell you everything I know and absolutely won't hide anything from you." Mo Lien coldly swept a glance over him. "Who are you to the Ani Prefecture's Prefecture Lord's Hall of Care? This lowly one is the Prefecture Lord's personal attendant. I've already followed him for many years." "That means you know him very well." Chapter 22:19. Yes. Mo Lien nodded at him with a smile that wasn't a smile, then glanced at Arbor, who was leaning against her. The latter nodded in understanding and took out a puppet charm. Without another word, he inserted it between Qi Lianhai's eyebrows. Originally, with Arbor's current cultivation level, the puppet charm he made was ineffective against Qi Lianhai. However, Qi Lianhai was now under Mo Lien's control, so it couldn't be easier to make him fall for the charm. Qi Lianhai only felt pain in his conscience before he seemed to lose consciousness. His consciousness was completely blurred. "What's your name?" Arbor asked coldly. "Qi Lianhai." "Kneel." Qi Lianhai obediently knelt down and pressed his head against the ground in front of the two people, lying there piously. The dozen or so Ani Prefecture disciples who were originally kneeling on the ground all shrank back in fright when they saw this. What was going on? Steward Qi actually knelt down so obediently. Tong led a group of people to surround them with swords raised. One of the men suddenly broke into a run and rushed toward an opening. This person's face was deathly pale with fright. While he was madly running for his life, Tong didn't even look at him. He directly raised his sword and pierced through his back, piercing through his heart. With a plop, that person fell to the ground. How could a 7th-rank spiritual master die so easily? Tong sneered and directly pierced through the back of that person's head with his sword. The person lying on the ground shuddered and screamed. This time, the sword pierced through his head, so he naturally couldn't be any more dead. One had to know that he originally wanted to play dead and look for a chance to escape. He didn't expect that playing dead would fail and that he would really become a corpse. When the others saw Qi Lianhai's pious and obedient appearance, they were all bewildered. They were very clear that the Crown Princess and Crown Prince definitely had some strange methods. However, their thoughts of escaping all disappeared without a trace when they saw their companions die tragically. Qi Lianhai. Arbor coldly called out his name. His small expressionless face was cold and indifferent. Do you know why I want you to go back? Qi Lianhai bowed his head and kowtowed to the ground, his face filled with a respectful expression. Arbor came to Qi Lianhai like a nimble cat and looked at him coldly. He leaned over and whispered, I want you to go back. Kill. Caretaker Hall. Ani Prefecture's Prefecture Lord's residence. Guan Yisong was stopped by two guards. Her pretty face was filled with anger and anger. I want to see my father. I want to see my father. Sixth young mistress, I'm really sorry. The manor head is currently with Madame Hua. The manor head has ordered that no one is to disturb them. Guan Yisong's pretty face was flushed purple, and her eyes were misty. If you let me in, I'll take responsibility for anything that happens. I want to see my father. I want. The two guards impatiently extended their arms to stop Guan Yibo. Sixth miss, please behave yourself. You. Guan Yisong pointed at the two snobbish guards and shouted hysterically, get out of the way. The two guards' faces darkened, and they blocked Guan Yisong with their crossed blades. Sixth miss, please don't make things difficult for our subordinates. The manor head has ordered that no one is allowed to enter. My mother is about to die. I want my father to open the wonderful treasure tower and give me the blood coagulation pill to save my mother's life. One of the two guards couldn't help but snort. Aunt Jiang has always been weak and sickly. She uses pills above the profound grade to keep her life. Chapter 22:20. When has she ever been well? That's right, Sixth Miss is overly worried. It's fine. Perhaps you'll find that Aunt Jiang has already recovered when you return. This time is different from the past. Mother's symptoms are very serious. Medicine Master Gu said that the blood coagulation pill can save my mother. The blood coagulation pill. Ah. Her body was pushed by the two guards, and she almost couldn't stand steadily as she fell down a few steps. Sixth miss. If you continue to mess around like this, the two of us will also be punished along with you. Isn't that right? Sixth miss, please go back. If there's anything you need, come early tomorrow. Guan Yisong charged up the steps as if she had gone mad. Two streams of fire spirit rushed towards the two guards' chests. However, she was only a small first-rank spirit master. In front of two third-rank spirit master guards, she was clearly not enough. One of the guards looked at her mockingly and sneered. He reached out his hand and blocked her fire spirit. The thin stream of fire spirit energy that Guan Yisong released burned for less than 3 seconds in the guard's hand before slowly extinguishing. The guard crooked his mouth and laughed mockingly, Sixth miss, you don't have to waste your energy with this little bit of spiritual power. You know you can't break through, so what are you trying to do? We don't want to fight you. If we hurt you, we won't be able to explain it to the manor head. Heh. The other guard chuckled. Sixth young miss, please. Father. 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 I beg you to see your daughter. Father. Father. Guan Yisong charged up the steps with all her might. She was pushed down several more steps by the two guards. After a few more times, the guards were completely impatient. They didn't control their strength. One of them gave her a hard shove and threw her onto the stairs with all his might. Guan Yisong rolled twice on the steps. She reached out to steady herself. When she stood up, she saw that the door to the manor head's residence was wide open. Her father, Guan Zhaotang, was wearing an unbuttoned inner garment. He walked out with a young and plump woman in his arms. He stood high up on the steps and looked down at her coldly. "Guaniba, what are you doing?" The Hall of Care shouted coldly. The plump woman in Guan Zhaotang's arms twisted her waist and climbed onto Guan Zhaotang's chest. She smiled as she looked at Guaniba, whose hair was messed up after she fell on the stairs. "What sixth young mistress?" She looked worse than a dog. The woman glanced at Guan Yisong mockingly before shaking her body again. Then, she snuggled into Guan Zhaotang's arms as if she had no bones. "Father. Please bestow the blood coagulation elixir fruit to save concubine mother." Guan Yisong crawled to her feet and knelt on the ground. She crawled toward the stairs on all fours. "Father. Nonsense." Guan Zhaotang glared at his youngest daughter coldly. "Do you know what the blood coagulation pill fruit is?" Guan Zhaotang looked at his daughter coldly and sneered from the bottom of his heart. "That is a god-tier pill. Deity level. There was only one in the entire Guan family. That's a life-saving medicine. How could you use it on your useless mother? Go back. Don't talk nonsense in the future." "Father." Guan Yisong knelt on the ground and crawled up a few more steps. "Father. I can give up everything. I only ask that you bestow the blood coagulation elixir fruit to save concubine mother's life." "Heh." Guan Zhaotang sneered at her. Chapter 22-21. Who do you think you are? Is it your talented elder sister? What can a mere first-rank spirit master do for the family? Go back to your room and don't come out and embarrass yourself. "Father." Guan Yisong screamed at the top of her lungs. "Aya, sixth young mistress. You really don't know how to behave." Madame Hua twisted her slender waist and pointed at Guan Yisong. "Master has been troubled by many things recently. As a daughter, it's fine if you don't share the family's burden, but why do you keep bothering him with small matters?" All right. Since you're still young, Master won't hold it against you. You should hurry back to your own court." Father. Guan Yisong climbed up a few steps, but was stopped by two guards again. "Send sixth young mistress back." Guan Zhaotang flicked his sleeves and left with Madame Hua. He said coldly, "No need to be polite. Throw her out. Sixth young mistress. Please." The two guards disrespected Guan Yisong even more after receiving the order. They pushed Guan Yisong down the stairs and looked down at her coldly. "Tch, a useless concubine mother who's been sick for a long time still wants to use the blood coagulation pill. Dream on. Father. Please save concubine mother's life. Father." Guan Yisong's eyes were filled with tears, and she could barely see the road clearly. Her gaze was fixed on Guan Zhaotang's departing figure, and her grief turned into deep hatred. "Guan Zhaotang. You cruel and unscrupulous thing. If my mother hadn't led the entire Jiang family to support you and caused the Jiang family to fall apart, would you have the riches you have today? Guan Zhaotang. You're not human." Guan Zhaotang stopped in his tracks, turned his head abruptly and roared, "Are you all dead? Shut her mouth and give her a good beating. It's the manor head." A few ferocious guards rushed out and dragged Guan Yisong away. They threw her down the stairs and began to beat her. Guan Yisong glared at her father, Guan Zhaotang, who was standing on the stairs. She laughed madly and said, "Guan Zhaotang, you will get what you deserve. The entire Guan family will suffer retribution. You cruel and unscrupulous thing. You'll die a horrible death." Guan Yiba's mouth was gagged by a dirty rag. Then, a heavy stick landed on her body. After a few hits, she was covered in wounds and blood. Bo. A thin and weak servant girl walked over with a trembling woman who couldn't even walk properly. Bo. When the woman saw her daughter's situation, she let out a sorrowful cry. She struggled to let go of the young maid's hand. She didn't know where her divine strength came from, but she pounced over and hugged her daughter tightly. The few crazy guards didn't care and smashed their sticks straight at the mother and daughter. Oh, oh. Guaniba shook her blood-soaked hair and flipped her body around. She tried her best to protect her mother and withstand the blows from the batons. Don't hit my bow, The woman tried her best to protect her daughter, but her cultivation was too low. In the end, she was still protected by Guanisang. Guan Zhaotang only looked coldly at the mother and daughter before leaving with his arm around Madame Hua's waist. He didn't care about the mother and daughter's pitiful cries. Guan Zhaotang had many children, and many of them were talented geniuses. He didn't care about a mediocre woman like Guanisang. Chapter 22-22. 7 days later at the beginning of January, in the depths of winter. The entire Anyi prefecture's capital was enveloped in a vast expanse of white cold air. On the bustling main street, an inconspicuous carriage with a black awning appeared. It followed the bustling main street and headed in the direction of the main mansion. When it passed the end of the main street, the curtain of the black awning carriage was gently lifted by a small white hand. Shui's gaze followed the endless stream of people and landed in front of a pharmacy. There were more than a dozen people watching the show there. They were pointing at a woman in thin clothes kneeling on the ground and whispering to each other. What's going on? This woman came before dawn. She wants to buy medicine on credit from Liangyuan medicine shop. It's a pity that the medicine shop isn't a charity hall. Shopkeeper. Please give me a blood coagulation pill fruit. I can work for the medicine shop to pay off my debt. I can be an ox or a horse for the rest of my life. The woman knelt on the ground and took a few steps forward, calling out to the people in the shop. There were scars on her head and arms, and her face was very pale. It was as if she had been beaten up, and her body was covered in wounds. The medicine shop opened a small door, and an old shopkeeper in his 50s walked out. He sighed at her and said, "Miss, please go back. Our medicine shop doesn't need help at the moment. Shopkeeper, I beg you to show some mercy. My mother is waiting for the medicine to save her life." My mother. Miss, please don't force me. The blood coagulation pill fruit you mentioned is a divine-level medicine. Not to mention that our medicine shop doesn't have it at all. Even if you search the entire Anyi prefecture's capital, even the pill shop might not be able to find it. Moreover, the blood coagulation pill fruit is priceless. If our Liangyuan medicine shop has this divine medicine, it will naturally be the treasure of the shop. How can we give it to you so easily? Mississippi. Please go back. Shopkeeper. Please save my mother. The woman kowtowed heavily on the ground and sobbed. I beg you, shopkeeper, I beg you. In the shop, a young master wearing a pure white fox fur coat slowly walked out. As soon as this person appeared in front of people, they felt that their eyes were shining. They only felt that he was graceful and elegant, and his peerless talent was indescribable. Young master. The young master raised his hand slightly to stop the shopkeeper from speaking. He glanced at the girl and said coldly, "There's nothing here that you want. You don't have to kneel here and waste your time." The shopkeeper couldn't bear to see her like this. He sighed and glanced at her. "Miss, my family's young master is right. Instead of continuing to waste time here, why don't you hurry back? Perhaps you can still see your mother again." The person kneeling in front of Liangyuan medicine shop was naturally Guanisang. At this moment, she raised her head. Her eyes were filled with tears as she looked at the handsome young man and then at the shopkeeper. Grief welled up in his heart, and he fell to the ground in a daze. Could it be that her mother was really going to leave her? From today onwards, she would be alone in this world, and she would have no more relatives. Stop the car. The cold voice frightened the coachman. His arm trembled slightly, and he quickly pulled the reins to stop the horse. After a series of rustling sounds, a little girl wrapped in a fiery red cloak walked down from the carriage. She stood in the distance, and her gaze fell indifferently on Guan-yi-sang. At some point in time, small pieces of snow had begun to fall. The little girl stared deeply at the woman kneeling on the ground through the thin layer of snow. Chapter 22-23. Mo Lien got out of the car and reached out to hold her cold little hand. He asked softly, "Jojo, what's wrong?" Arbor's gaze fell on the girl for a long time. It was so long that her mind was almost blank. It was so long that she felt like she was about to become a beautiful snow sculpture. It was as if she was the only one left in the entire world. She stood there helplessly. Fine snow fell coldly on her body, face, hair, and neck. Ripples seemed to appear in front of her eyes, floating slowly. It made her see the past, the past, the past, the past. That small figure was also like this, kneeling in front of the pharmacy, begging the shopkeeper to give her a stock of spirit medicine, begging him to go home with her to see her mother who was on the verge of death after giving birth. Back then, she was so small, so pitiful, so insignificant. She was like a speck of dust between heaven and earth. She was so weak that it made people's hearts tremble. She was so fragile that it made people scared. With one touch, the bubbles in front of her would all shatter into dust and be blown away by the wind. "Are you cold?" Mo Lien realized that there was something wrong with her emotions. He suddenly reached out and pulled her into his arms. He held her little hands and rubbed them gently. He exhaled a breath of hot air. "Are you feeling stuffy?" Arbor's dark eyes moved slightly in their sockets. Her gaze fell on Mo Lien's face. She reached out and touched his face with her cold little hands. "Are you cold?" "Yes." He held her little hands tightly and blew on them. "No matter how cold it is, I can warm them up. Even if it's winter or frost, and all things wither. As long as I'm here, Jojo will never be afraid of the cold." Arbor laughed from the bottom of her heart. She pursed her lips and glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. "Poor. How am I poor?" Mo Lien reached out and hugged her. "Do you want to get in the car?" "All right," Arbor said with a flick of his finger. 2 dots of light flew out and landed in Guaniba's palm. The young master's gaze fell deeply on her departing figure, and his left hand involuntarily clenched slightly. Actually, he had already noticed her from the moment she got out of the car. He watched as her gaze landed on Guaniba. He watched as the two of them shook hands as if no one else was around. He watched as they hugged and whispered their feelings to each other. She did not notice his presence at all. He watched as she turned around and left after giving him the medicine. She didn't even spare him a glance. It was as if Ding Yun did not exist in this world at all. Several shouts rose and fell from the crowd. While everyone's gazes fell on the medicine bottle in Guaniba's hand, only young Master Ding's gaze remained focused on the girl's slender figure as she was helped into the carriage. "Aya, young lady, this is the blood coagulation pill fruit." The shopkeeper excitedly pointed at the small, dark red fruit in Guaniba's hand and couldn't help but cry out in surprise. This is a gift from an expert." The shopkeeper hurriedly looked around. At this moment, everyone's gazes followed the shopkeeper's gaze and landed on the inconspicuous carriage with a black awning around the corner. "Benefactor, please wait. Benefactor, please tell me your name. Iba will repay you in the future." Guaniba excitedly chased a few steps forward. However, she only saw the corner of a red robe flash before her eyes. Chapter 22-24. The black canopied carriage quickly moved and sped away. The shopkeeper chased after them and stroked his beard as he looked at the blood coagulation pill in Guaniba's hand. He praised, as expected of a divine medicine. Miss, quickly put it in my jade box. Don't let its medicinal properties dissipate. Thank you, shopkeeper. Guaniba gratefully bowed to the shopkeeper and took a small jade box. She put the blood coagulation pill, which was still warm and had a trace of earthy smell, into the jade box. Miss, what kind of spirit medicine is in this small porcelain bottle? Can this old man take a look? Shopkeeper, please. Guaniba handed the bottle to the old shopkeeper, who reached out to take it with both hands. The shopkeeper uncorked the bottle, and everyone smelled a refreshing medicinal fragrance in the air. The shopkeeper's expression became serious. He hurriedly and carefully poured out a pill. As he examined it, he nodded and said, "This is a healing medicine that can heal both internal and external injuries. Take one orally and apply it to external injuries. It will form a scab and heal in a day. Although it is only a profound-grade medicinal pill, its effects are hundreds or even thousands of times better than normal profound-grade medicinal pills. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it is a sky-grade medicinal pill. Miss, quickly put it away and go home to treat your mother's injuries." The shopkeeper hurriedly put the medicine back into the bottle and urged her to leave. Guaniba nodded with a slightly excited expression. After thanking the shopkeeper, she hurriedly flew back home. This girl's luck is truly extraordinary. The shopkeeper nodded with a smile. When he turned around, he saw his young master's frosty gaze in the distance. He couldn't help but feel shocked. His young master was fine just now. Why is he like this now? Young Master Ding didn't say anything. He turned around and walked into the medicine shop. His slender figure seemed somewhat lonely and indifferent. The shopkeeper saw that his young master was in a bad mood, so he didn't dare to say anything. He hurriedly followed him in and took care of business. In the distance, the shopkeeper heard a muffled sound from the other side of the corridor. He was inwardly shocked. He could only faintly hear his young master let out a broken murmur. Is he that good? Him. The shopkeeper didn't dare to ask any more questions. He just buried his head and ordered the workers to work. Inside the carriage, Arbor was half leaning against the window, holding his chin as he looked at the falling snow outside. One of his small hands slipped out and caught a sparkling snowflake outside. When she retracted her hand, the snowflake melted into a sparkling and translucent six-chested ice crystal. "All right, stop playing. Come and have some hot tea." Mo Lien looked at her helplessly. He pulled her into his arms and gave her a cup of tea with a moderate temperature. "Jojo, did you remember your bad nightmare just now?" Arbor held the warm teacup and nodded slowly. "At that time, I really wanted a benefactor to appear in my life and give me a hand. Unfortunately, until the day he died, he still had nothing. Mo Lien looked at her deeply and smiled. "I don't need it now. Our future is in our hands, isn't it?" "Yes." Xiao Mu placed her small, warm hand on his face and said with a wink, "Mo Lien, when I said that I liked you that day, it was from the bottom of my heart, from the bottom of my heart. I definitely wasn't lying." "I know." Mo Lien chuckled. He reached out and gently pulled her little hand away. He pressed it to his lips and kissed it slowly. "Jojo, I like you too." Chapter 22-25. Tsang Prefecture, Phoenix Emperor City. Snowflakes fluttered down like goose feathers. Inside the spacious and deserted Taiji Palace, Duan Yu was dressed plainly as he leaned against the window for a long time. His gaze was fixed on the distant horizon, and no one knew what he was thinking about. The junior eunuch who was accompanying him quickly entered, but he was slightly startled. "Your Highness, you've been standing by the window in the wind for nearly 2 hours." The junior eunuch quickly said, "How about having Xiao Kezi serve your meal?" Duan Yu faintly glanced at him and waved his hand. "I'm not hungry." "Don't be busy. Withdraw." He only wanted to quietly be alone for a while. The junior eunuch quickly said, "Your Highness, you haven't eaten any tea or rice for most of the day. Do you have any requests? Feel free to instruct Xiao Kezi." Duan Yu was fed up with his nagging and turned to retreat from the window to the table. "All right, bring some tea over." "Your Highness. Why are you so long-winded?" Duan Yu irritably glared at him. "With my cultivation, I won't starve to death even if I don't eat a single grain of rice for half a month, right? What are you worrying about?" Xiao Kezi pursed his lips and pitifully retreated. Before he could retreat out of the hall, he saw a dignified and solemn maidservant jogging inside. That maidservant glanced at Xiao Kezi from the corner of her eye, but she didn't ask anything when she saw his listless appearance. She then bowed and saluted, "Your Highness, the list for the winter hunt has been announced, and your Highness also needs to accompany His Highness. There are less than 20 days left before the departure date, so everything needs to be prepared quickly." Xiao Kezi pursed his lips and rolled his eyes. Anti-Yuan Zhen, with His Highness cultivation, what doesn't he have in his inner world? What does he need to prepare? The maidservant fiercely glared at Xiao Kezi. "Nonsense! How can you speak to His Highness like that?" Duan Yu looked up at that junior eunuch who was pursing his lips and couldn't help but chuckle. He threw down the book in his hand and said, all right. Go prepare the meal." This punk was quite gutsy to even dare to tease master. Lil Ku Zi giggled and hurriedly responded. He got up and ran out to find someone to serve the meal. "Your Highness, it's still quite far away from the winter hunt." Yuan Zhen bowed his head and said, "Now that midwinter has arrived, there is a lot of snow and rain, and the road is not easy to travel. There are not many considerate people around His Highness. This servant will draw up a list of names for the trip tomorrow. Your Highness can see who you like to bring, or who you need to add. All right, there's no need to trouble yourself." Duan Yu waved his hand disinterestedly and shook his head. "Just you and Xiao Ku Zi will be fine." "That won't do," Yuan Zhen said with disapproval. "Since your Highness doesn't care about this matter, then this servant will make the decision on the manpower. If you're going out, you should at least bring more guards and servants with you." Duan Yu couldn't even listen to Yuan Zhen's rambling. He merely propped up his chin with one hand as he gazed at the balls of snow outside the window, his gaze slightly dazed. "How long will it snow in Sangzhou?" Duan Yu raved. Auntie Yuan Zhen couldn't help but be startled. She turned to look outside the window and said softly, "It snows heavily in Sangzhou for 7 to 8 days every time. It really is quite long. When I was on Seacombe Planet, I heard about it before. The Divine Province's Phoenix Wood, Sangzhou's Snowfield Flower, and Underworld Province's remote Ghost Grass grow in the hottest, coldest, and most poisonous places respectively." Chapter 22-26. According to legend, gathering these 3 divine herbs and adding a sacred rank spirit fruit, the bloodshed vermilion fruit, can create a soul-returning pill that reverses yin and yang. Duan Yu propped up his chin with one hand and looked up at Yuan Zhen. "Is that true?" Yuan Zhen was taken aback and pondered for a few seconds before replying, "I have indeed heard of these herbs, but it's only been a legend after so many years. This prince heard that the place we're going to hunt this time is an extremely cold place, the heavenly ice and snow region. If we can find that Snowfield divine flower while we're at it, then everything will be perfect." Yuan Zhen couldn't help but sigh when he saw his master's distracted appearance. This servant heard that the Snowfield divine flower only grows in extremely cold places. It's fine to touch it once in a while, but after repeated touches, it will open all of its petals and spit out all of the icicles inside. It will envelop a person and devour their bones without leaving a trace. Therefore, it's extremely difficult to pluck the Snowfield divine flower. Moreover, this kind of divine herb has always been a fantastic story passed down by word of mouth. In reality, no one has ever obtained it before. Duan Yu exhaled softly and muttered with a spurious smile, "It's really too similar. A body full of icicles that can take a person's life without warning." As he spoke, Duan Yu seemed to have thought of something and chuckled to himself. Yuan Zhen didn't understand what His Highness was saying, but his gaze lingered on him for a moment. Seeing that Duan Yu didn't say anything else, he bowed and slowly retreated. The sky had already completely darkened. Inside Taiji Palace, there were various kinds of candlesticks and palace lanterns that illuminated the entire palace pavilion under the night sky. Green tiles and vermilion buildings, exquisite jade pavilions. Layer upon layer, arranged in picturesque disorder. The lit palace lanterns were set off by the winter lake's setting sun. The curtain of night was reflected on the pavilions, and the dark sky was like a painting that, Mai Chiao's section Breakyo, Ani Prefecture's Prefecture Lord's residence. After dismissing the clingy Madame Hua, Ani Prefecture's Prefecture Lord, Guan Zhaotang, sat in the main hall with a gloomy expression. He coldly gazed at the middle-aged man kneeling in front of him with his head bowed. "Why aren't you speaking? This subordinate has failed in his task, please punish me, my lord." Guan Zhaotang glanced at him coldly. "Forget it. I've underestimated my opponent this time. Get up first." "Thank you, manor head." Qi Lianhai lowered his head and stood up. "I recently obtained a spirit breakthrough pill that can increase my cultivation." Guan Zhaotang flipped his hand and took out a porcelain bottle from his inner world. With a face full of joy, he said, "Let's put the previous matters aside for now. We'll talk about it again when I become a level 14 spirit master." "Congratulations, manor head." Qi Lianhai congratulated him expressionlessly. Unfortunately, Guan Zhaotang was so immersed in his own joy that he didn't notice anything wrong with Qi Lianhai's expression. "You stand guard outside." "Yes." Qi Lianhai walked out and reached out to close the door. He turned his head and looked coldly at Guan Zhaotang through the shadowy door and window. At the same time, in the courtyard of Ani Prefecture, Guan Yiba ran back excitedly and hurriedly helped her dying mother up from the bed. While instructing a servant girl to support her mother, she took out a small dark red fruit from her inner world. Guan Yiba's eyes were filled with excitement. She hurriedly reached out and stuffed the fruit into Aunt Zhang's mouth. "Mother! Quickly swallow it, mother!" Guan Yiba hurriedly shouted in her heart. Chapter 22-27. In just a few moments, concubine Jiang, who was on the brink of death, felt much better. Even her heartbeat became stronger. Seeing this, Guan Yisang laughed from the bottom of her heart. She hugged her mother tightly and cried, "Mother, mother, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, mother." Ahem, ahem, ahem. Concubine Jiang slowly woke up. When she saw her daughter's face in front of her, she couldn't help but be slightly shocked. She almost cried out immediately, My poor child, are we mother and daughter both already dead?" "Don't speak nonsense, mother." Guan Yisang hastily patted her hand, a hint of a smile in her eyes. "Are you feeling better now? I'll help you apply some medicine to your wounds. You'll recover soon." Concubine Jiang couldn't help but reveal a pleasantly surprised expression. I do feel much better now." What medicine did you give mother?" "It's the blood coagulation pill." "What?" Concubine Jiang couldn't help but be shocked. She hurriedly grabbed Guan Yiba's arm and asked, Don't do anything stupid. Don't steal the divine medicine from the strange treasure pavilion for my illness." Guan Yisang quickly said, "Mother, don't worry about it. This medicine has nothing to do with the Tower of Wonders," Guan Yisang said coldly. When she thought about how cruel Guan Zhaotang had been to her, she couldn't help but laugh. "We have nothing to say to the Guan family in the future." Before concubine Jiang could ask her daughter what had happened, she saw Guan Yisang stand up. She quickly moved to the door and pressed her hand on the windowsill. She looked outside cautiously. What's wrong? I think there's a fire outside. Guan Yisang's eyes were slightly suspicious. She moved closer to the window and looked outside a few more times. When she looked, she saw that there was indeed a raging fire in the direction of the Tower of Wonders. Guan Yisang didn't have the slightest sympathy. She looked outside for a long time before retracting her gaze and walking quickly to her mother. Mother, it's not peaceful outside. Let's turn off the lights and sleep. No matter what happens later, don't get up. The young maidservant serving concubine Jiang was so scared that she was trembling. Guan Yisang didn't have the time to care about the servant girl's feelings. She waved her hand and extinguished the lights in the room. The master and servant found a place to rest. However, in this small room, the bed under her mother was the only bed. The servant girl was curled up on the edge of the bed. Guan Yisang's eyes closed. In the latter half of the night, the entire Guan family was in an uproar as if they had been ignited by firecrackers. The footsteps of people coming and going could be heard from both inside and outside, and the sound spread all the way to their courtyard. Bang! 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 Someone knocked on the door. Bam! Guan Yisang's heart. He got up and opened the door. The door creaked, and it sounded particularly ear-piercing in the silent night. The housekeeper frowned and looked at her from head to toe. Her gaze paused on Guan Yibao's bruised arm. Where is concubine Jiang? What else do you want? Guan Yisang asked coldly. Concubine Jiang just fell asleep. Do you want a dying patient to wake up and greet her? The housekeeper raised the candlestick in his hand and shone it into the room. Chapter 22-28. She saw concubine Jiang wrapped in a thin blanket, only revealing half of her pale and bloodless face. Humph! The steward snorted heavily, his eyebrows arched as he rudely said, a thief broke into the Tower of Wonders just now. If sixth young miss discovers anything amiss, remember to report it immediately. Don't act alone. The thief's cultivation is quite high this time. Guan Yisang coldly looked at the snobbish steward and didn't say a word to him. When the steward turned around, Guan Yisang unceremoniously slammed the door shut with a bang. The steward was so angry that he turned around and glared at the door. He had the urge to smash it open again. An unfavored sixth young miss dared to throw a tantrum in front of him. She must be tired of living. She'll suffer in the future. Steward Hu, where do you think we should go now? Go back. Steward Hu angrily scolded, go back to the Tower of Wonders. Steward. As soon as he said that, he heard a panic-stricken cry coming from the winding path. Soon, an Ani prefecture's servant hurriedly arrived in front of Chief Steward Hu and almost fell to the ground with a grunt. Steward, it's bad. You're the one who's in trouble. Steward Hu angrily kicked the servant. If you have something to say it quickly. Don't talk nonsense all day long. The servant's waist hurt from the kick, but he didn't dare to resist. He hurriedly nodded and bowed. Steward Hu, you had this lowly one take the guards to inventory the items in the Tower of Wonders. Our subordinates have discovered something. Above the third floor of the strange treasure tower, everything was there. It's all gone. What? Most of the items stored on the third floor up were mystic grade and above treasures. Forging materials, medicinal pills, all kinds of spirit tools and treasures, spiritual techniques, and cultivation methods. Basically, all of the Guan family's wealth was there. Steward Hu jumped up and hurriedly rushed in the direction of the Tower of Wonders. As he ran, he cursed loudly, didn't I tell you to stay there and watch? What's going on? Have you informed the manor head? Guan Yibao listened as the sounds from the small courtyard grew further and further away. After a long while, she opened the door again and looked coldly at the lonely and dilapidated courtyard. Concubine Jiang was now able to get out of bed. She hurriedly got off the bed and went to Guan Yibao's side. She grabbed her arm and asked, Bao, what happened? Something really happened to the strange treasure tower. Guan couldn't help but sneer in her heart. Just now, she deliberately did not use the healing medicine to show the wound on her arm to Chief Hu. It was not a peaceful day in the Guan family. It seemed that someone had sneaked into the strange treasure tower. If the injuries on his body disappeared at this moment, he would definitely become the focus of Supervisor Hu's investigation. Mother. Guan quickly walked to the bedside and looked at the scars on her body. She hurriedly said, I won't remove these for now. Something happened to the Guan family, but that has nothing to do with us. Guan sneered and said, we just need to remember to try our best not to get into trouble. At the same time, Xiao Mu, who had put on an invisibility talisman and was holding Mo Lian's hand, ostentatiously wandered around the lofty treasures pavilion, suddenly came to a halt. I'm so sleepy. I need to catch up on my sleep. Chapter 22-29. Jojo. Mo Lian leaned close to her and asked in a low voice, what did you see? Arbor raised his small hand and covered his mouth. He whispered, keep your voice down. Mo Lian blinked and pulled her hand away from his mouth. He held it in his hand and whispered, let's call this a thief. Xiao Mu nodded and dragged her husband upstairs for a stroll. At this time, the fire outside the building was already burning fiercely. There were dozens of people inside and outside the building. Some were putting out the fire, and some were saving things. It was very noisy. A servant with a drooping old face ran in from the outside crying. He slapped his thigh and wailed, it's over, it's over, it's over, it's over, it's over, it's over, it's over. Looking at the emptiness of the second floor, the old servant collapsed to the ground. Oh, my mother. This great bandit was truly hateful. They actually emptied the entire floor. This damn thief. Oh. How am I supposed to explain this? Chief Hu, what do we do now, Chief Hu? Scram. Roll. Hurry up and report to the manor head. What are you guys still doing here? Scram. Head steward who kicked the manservants' buttocks twice, and told them to hurry out and report to the manor head. But at this critical juncture, if he really went to report to the manor head, he would only be waiting for death. None of the servants were truly stupid. None of them moved when they heard her words. They all pretended to fall to the ground and groaned. Head steward who was so angry that he was about to ascend to the heavens. He forcefully stepped on a manservant's foot and said, quickly go and inform the manor head. Arbor was standing beside the servant. Just as he was about to walk over, Mo Lian reached out and pulled him to her side, giving him a comforting rub. Don't go there. He whispered in her ear. His voice seemed to float on her face, bringing with it a warm breath, as if there was a trace of electric current flowing through her body. Xiao Mu's petite body was turned around by him, and she inexplicably felt that her face was a bit hot. She raised her petite hand and pressed it against his chin, forcefully pushing away his handsome face that was closing in on her. Why are you pushing me? He couldn't help but chuckle. The more she pushed him, the closer this guy got to her. He pulled her into his arms and hugged her tightly. Hot. The little fellow angrily reached out a small paw from his chest and pulled his hair. Don't mess around. Mo Lian pulled her hand down and pinched it. She laughed softly and said, you won't be pretty if you pull your husband bald. Arbor's mouth twitched. He moved his little body in his arms. Keep your voice down. They're about to discover us. So what if they discover us? Mo Lian said nonchalantly. You wanted to walk over just now. Arbor snorted. She looked at the butler's ugly face and really wanted to go over and kick him. If you kick him, we'll be exposed. He used his finger to lift a strand of hair by her ear and laughed in a low voice. Chocho said that there's something strange about this place. Do you want All our efforts to go to waste. This guy was so annoying today. Why did she feel that Jojo's face was steaming? Arbor huffed and rubbed against his chest. If you continue to make a fuss, I'll throw you to Paradise Planet. Prince Mo blinked pitifully and whispered in her ear, Jojo, are you really going to throw me away? Arbor! Exclamation point. This peerless demon was so annoying. Chapter 2230. Mo Lien held back her laughter and pulled her to the side to avoid the noisy crowd of an E-prefecture's people. At this moment, the strange treasure tower was bustling with people coming and going. The two of them were talking in a low voice while hiding from others, so they naturally wouldn't attract anyone's attention. Manager Hu, we've checked the floors upstairs. They're all empty. Aside from the first floor, the top 5 floors have all been emptied, Manager Hu. Arbor felt a little funny when she saw a group of people coming and going like headless flies. When she looked up at Mo Lien, Crown Prince Mo was currently gazing down at her with a grin. He leaned close to her ear and whispered, the old man will definitely personally invite the caretaker hall later. We just have to wait. Sure enough, Manager Hu dawdled for a while before he couldn't hold himself back and ran out. He hurriedly rushed to Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord's residence to report the situation. Manager Hu had just arrived at the Prefecture Lord's residence, but before he could send someone in to report, he heard a woman's shrill cry for help from inside. Madame Hua ran out of the bedroom with her hair disheveled and her clothes disheveled. She screamed, someone come. Someone come. Someone come. Manager Hu and a few imperial bodyguards went forward at the same time and hastily stopped the madly screaming Madame Hua. Madam, what's going on? Madame Hua said with a frightened expression, quick, quick. Prefecture Lord. Bang! The door to the Prefecture Lord's bedroom was suddenly kicked open from the inside. The door was wide open, and a figure stumbled out from inside. He held his head and howled a few times. Prefecture. Prefecture Lord. Manager Hu's eyes were sharp. He immediately saw the person who rushed out from inside and was covered in blood. It was Ani Prefecture's Prefecture Lord, Guan Zhaotang. Guan Zhaotang was currently in a very sorry state. Not only was he covered in blood, but his eyes also seemed to have been pierced by something sharp. His eyes were bloodshot. His hair was disheveled as he howled like a madman. He held onto the wall with one hand and stumbled everywhere. A few imperial bodyguards were so frightened that they retreated a few steps, not daring to go forward to help him. Ah! Guan Zhaotang clasped his hands together, and the spiritual energy in his body rushed out like a tsunami. The surging spiritual power sent several guards flying, one by one, to the ground, vomiting blood and fainting. Guan Zhaotang's eyes were filled with blood and he could no longer see. He supported his head with one hand and looked at Chief Hu with a twisted expression. Chief Hu was so frightened that his heart almost jumped out of his chest. Although she knew that Guan Zhaotang couldn't see her at all, she still felt very scared when those bloodshot eyes stared straight at her. Manor Lord, how are you? How could Director Hu know what had happened? He resisted the numbness in his scalp and reached out to support Guan Zhaotang with trembling hands. Ah! Guan Zhaotang roared angrily. He shook off Chief Hu's arm forcefully and roared into the sky. I'll kill you. I'll kill you. Manor head. Chief Steward Hu looked in the direction that Guan Zhaotang was pointing at. Moments later. Quick. Chief Hu urged a row of imperial bodyguards who had rushed over to search the prefecture lord's room. Soon, the imperial bodyguards carried out a lifeless corpse from the room. Chief Hu took a look and couldn't help but be shocked. Wasn't this Qi Lianhai? Chief Hu braced himself and trembled with fear as he said, Manor head, Bao Qi Lu was stolen. Ah! Make up for yesterday's 2 chapters. Chapter 2231. A quarter of an hour ago. Ani Prefecture's prefecture lord, Guan Zhaotang, was in his residence, seizing the time to break through to level 14. But at the critical moment of his cultivation, he was bitten by the watchdog that he had raised himself. Guan Zhaotang really didn't expect that Qi Lianhai would stab him in the back. That stab didn't hit his vital parts, and Qi Lianhai's blade was even flung away by the cyclone around him. However, due to this shock, his spiritual aura suddenly diverged in his body. Guan Zhaotang was unlucky enough to enter Qi deviation. His spiritual aura was in a mess, and his 7 orifices were bleeding at the same time. Just as he was struggling with all his might, desperately trying to suppress the chaotic spiritual energy, that damnable Qi Lianhai actually stabbed him in the back again. When Guan Zhaotang turned around, he felt 2 cold lights fly into his eyes. He subconsciously roared and struck out several palms in the dark. One of his palms landed on Qi Lianhai's body and sent him flying. Guan Zhaotang couldn't see with his eyes, but he could still use his spiritual sense. Therefore, he flew over and killed Qi Lianhai with a single sword strike without saying a word. At this moment, Guan Zhaotang's eyes were blurred with blood. He was secretly anxious and suspected that his eyes were most likely going to be ruined. Head steward, who was trembling with fear as he braced himself and said, "Manor Lord, Baoqi Lu was stolen." Ah! Guan Zhaotang was so angry that he immediately shook Manager Hu out. He turned around with disheveled hair and glared at Manager Hu with bloodshot eyes. Head steward, who was shocked. It took him a Herculean effort to get up from the ground. He scrambled to the foot of the Hall of Care and cried out in a tearful voice, "Manor Lord, there's something fishy about this matter. We've searched the outside of Treasure House several times, but we didn't even find a ghost. However, everything in the strange treasure tower has actually disappeared without a trace." Guan Zhaotang kicked Manager Hu's back, causing him to roll on the ground. Ah! Guan Zhaotang was both anxious and angry. He strode forward a few steps before suddenly stopping. His figure quickly retreated to Qi Lianhai's side. Guan Zhaotang picked up Qi Lianhai and used his spiritual sense to examine Qi Lianhai's body. If he didn't look, he wouldn't have known, but the moment he did, his body trembled violently for a moment. It turned out that Qi Lianhai's body had already been corroded by the poison and was decaying. No wonder he didn't have the slightest strength to resist after being hit by his palms. Who was controlling Qi Lianhai from behind? Manor Lord. Chief Steward, who called out to him while trembling with fear. "Old Master, are you all right? You really scared me to death just now." Ah! Madame Hua originally wanted to come forward and comfort Zhao Tang at this time. Unexpectedly, Guan Zhaotang was not in the mood to tease her. He pushed Madame Hua to the ground and did not even look at her. Guan Zhaotang led Chief Hu and the others to the Tower of Strange Treasures. He turned a deaf ear to Madame Hua's repeated calls of "Master" behind him. Guan Zhaotang looked back and forth with a twisted expression. He then hurried to the entrance of the Tower of Strange Treasures with Chief Hu and the others. Chief Hu looked up and saw that the Tower of Strange Treasures had turned black. He secretly glanced at his master, Guan Zhaotang, in shock and fear. Guan Zhaotang didn't say much to him and directly walked into the Tower of Strange Treasures. Guan Zhaotang's spiritual power was exhausted by using his spiritual sense to check the place. Chapter 2232. Moreover, when he was running back from the spiritual energy fork, he had been trying his best to suppress the scattered spiritual energy in his body. Now that he finally managed to suppress the spiritual energy, he was almost at his limit. Guan Zhaotang was now full of thoughts about his strange treasures tower. He didn't even have time to sit down and regulate his breath before he directly ran to the second floor of the strange treasures tower. When he reached the second floor and looked at the empty floor, Guan Zhaotang's heart sank. Then he went to the third floor, the fourth floor, the fifth floor, and the 6th floor. Except for the first floor that originally didn't have anything, he could still see a few mystic energy beads and the like on the shelves. The other floors from the 2nd floor to the 6th floor were all visited by the thief. He even stole the 100 treasure compartments that were used to store items. Ah! Guan Zhaotang roared sorrowfully. Because he used too much strength, his eyes began to bleed again. Manager who didn't even dare to fart. He shrank to the side and timidly followed Guan Zhaotang more than 10 steps away. Guan Zhaotang suddenly thought of something and quickly ran to the 6th floor. Manager who led a few bodyguards to follow him all the way to the 6th floor. Because they ran too fast, they all appeared to be a little out of breath. Guan Zhaotang went straight to the center of the empty 6th floor. The ring on his left hand suddenly lit up. Arbor, who had followed them all the way up, couldn't help but feel a little excited. He subconsciously held Mo Lian's hand. Finally, she didn't waste her time waiting here for this old guy. He's finally here. He finally came to open the secret room in the Strange Treasures Tower. Arbor's eyes lit up as he watched Guan Zhaotang's every move from afar. When he saw a beam of light fall on Guan Zhaotang's body in the middle, the beam enveloped Guan Zhaotang and floated up. Arbor quickly pulled Mo Lian's hand. The young couple hurriedly jumped into the beam of light. At the same time, they felt their bodies being pulled up slowly by a suction force. Guan Zhaotang's eyelids suddenly trembled, but on the surface, he continued to be pulled up by the beam of light. Arbor and Mo Lian held hands and were pulled to the 7th floor by the light beam. The two of them looked at each other and understood. From the outside, one would not be able to tell that there were 7 floors. But in fact, this hidden floor was very well concealed by the array glyphs. Arbor and Mo Lian had just stood on the 7th floor of Bao Qi Lu. Before they could even take a step forward, they heard the sound of locks being locked. Xiao Mu surveyed her surroundings and saw rows of iron bars descending from the 4 walls, trapping her and Mo Lian on the spot on the 7th floor. The two of them immediately appeared in front of the care hall. Arbor sized him up and sneered, "You're quite sharp." At this time, Guan Zhaotang was trembling with anger. Through his soul sense, he could vaguely see Arbor's appearance and expression. Guan Zhaotang anxiously shouted, Who are you? You've already sent your most trusted subordinate to kidnap me, yet you don't know who I am? Xiao Mu scoffed as she sized up the caretaker hall. It's you. Guan Zhaotang immediately reacted. Arbor. He really didn't expect Miss Qiao to be so bold as to directly barge into his lair. Qi Lian Hai became like that because of you, which? Guan Zhaotang asked angrily. Chapter 2233. Arbor looked at him coldly. The 7th floor of the Tower of Strange Treasures was very empty. Only a crooked old tree was planted in the middle, and it looked half dead. So what? So what if I'm not? What's the point of asking this now? Guan Zhaotang looked like a lamp that had run out of oil. Arbor was too lazy to talk to him. She took out her ruler and injected spiritual energy into it. Then, she waved a line of fire at Guan Zhaotang. When you sent people to kidnap me, you should have thought that there are some people you can't touch as you wish. Bang! A transparent defensive boundary rose in front of Guan Zhaotang and blocked all of Arbor's attacks. Arbor frowned and looked over. It was strange that the spiritual energy she injected into the boundary disappeared without a trace. After the line of fire was sent out, it should have been able to break through the defensive barrier, but it actually disappeared. Guan Zhaotang's sneer suddenly turned into a wild laugh. Do you think you can touch me on the 7th floor of the Tower of Strange Treasures? Little girl, you're still too naive. Guan Zhaotang walked to the old tree in the middle with a cold expression. He looked up and pointed at the tree behind him. Do you see this? I asked someone to plant this shielding tree here. Usually, its aura is hidden by the talisman array, so it won't affect people. But now, Ha 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 ha. Don't you feel panic and fear? Do you feel that your spiritual power and spiritual sense have disappeared? Guan Zhaotang sneered at the two of them mockingly. Your time of death is coming soon. The shielding tree doesn't just block people's spiritual sense. Arbor was curious. She thought of the trees in Dai Zong Mountain in Polan Prefecture that blocked people's spiritual sense. Then, she looked at the crooked old tree in front of her. Does it look like this? Ordinary shielding trees can only block people's spiritual sense. But the tree I transplanted is different. Guan Zhaotang laughed wildly. The blood vessels in his eyes fell again, and his face was distorted. Ha ha ha. Are you afraid? Guan Zhaotang sneered. If you're afraid, you can kneel and beg me. Arbor looked at him expressionlessly. The next moment, his fingertips moved, and dozens of explosion talismans flew out, encircling the Hall of Care. What are you doing? Guan Zhaotang's expression changed. Talisman. Why did so many talismans fly out when this little girl attacked? Are you an idiot? Arbor glanced at him coldly and didn't say anything else. He gestured with his hand and had dozens of explosion talismans fly in front of him. Boom! 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 A series of explosions shook the entire floor of the strange treasure building. The entire building was shaking. The guards on the lower floors all ran downstairs in shock, not knowing what was going on. Cough, cough, cough. Guan Zhaotang pressed his chest and took a few steps back. His face was slightly pale as he stared at the two indistinct figures in front of him. Right now, his own spiritual conscience had also been blocked, so he could only see Xiao Mu and Mo Lian's swaying figures when he looked at them. Xiao Mu curled her lips as she gazed at the man who had revealed himself after breaking open the defensive boundary. She gave him a mocking look. Chapter 22-34. A shielding tree is useless against me. She was a talisman practitioner, all right. Even if her cultivation was shielded, she still had plenty of talismans to deal with Guan Zhaotang. Who was the naive one here? Mo Lian didn't make a move from beginning to end. She only stood on the side and watched his JoJo with a grin. Arbor's aloof face was expressionless as she coldly gazed at Guan Zhaotang. You were the one who gave the order to snatch the sacred water from the holy water sect, right? It was your decision. Arbor stared deeply at Guan Zhaotang, and a wave of coldness flashed through her eyes. It was as if, as long as Guan Zhaotang admitted it, the abyss of hell would open its huge mouth and swallow him up in the next second. Guan Zhaotang was inexplicably alarmed. He only felt that when the little girl's pitch-black eyes stared at him, there was an inexplicably terrifying presence. Her eyes, which were like two ice pearls, seemed to carry an endless baleful aura. Guan Zhaotang inexplicably started to explain himself. I've also heard about Planet Sikong's holy water sect. This matter was entirely because Hong Jinchuan coveted the sacred water and provoked it himself. Guan Zhaotang was also furious when he mentioned this. Hong Jinchuan actually concealed such an important matter like the sacred water's appearance and didn't report it. Did he think that he could snatch another sect's treasure with the few people he had? If Hong Jinchuan hadn't acted on his own initiative, perhaps the sacred water would have already fallen into Guan Zhaotang's hands by now. His cultivation realm might have already broken through to the god realm. One talisman after another floated in Arbor's hand. Of course, you can deny it. I don't need you to admit it. Arbor's gaze hardened. 10, 20, 30. Countless five-spirit talismans fluttered around her. Guan Zhaotang's expression changed drastically. What are you doing? Heavens! These five-spirit talismans, what did it feel like to have hundreds of five-spirit talismans explode at the same time? Guan Zhaotang instantly comprehended. Following a huge explosion, Manager who was originally blocked outside the iron fence, was sent flying by the explosion and tumbled down the stairs. Head steward whose head was facing down, and he almost twisted his neck. When he got up and looked again, he saw that the entire building had collapsed. Crushed stones and dust rolled toward him. Choking on the dust in his mouth, Chief Hu could not help but cough violently. When he raised his head, he couldn't help but look in front of him in shock. A huge crooked old tree appeared in front of everyone, as if it had grown out of thin air. The tree's roots were intertwined, and its canopy was very large. It was so dense that it seemed to be protruding from the center of the building. A young girl in plain clothes was standing under this ancient tree, looking up at the sky. It didn't matter if he didn't look, but when Chief Hu looked up, he was so scared that his heart almost jumped out of his chest. He saw a person hanging upside down from the old tree. Both of his hands were bound by the spirit-binding rope, and he was struggling with all his might. Who else could it be but Guan Zhaotang? The guards of Ani Prefecture had long been scared witless and fled after hearing the news. Chief Hu also hurriedly crawled out, only wanting to get as far away from this place as possible. He felt that if he continued to stay here, there might be more unlucky things waiting for him here. Arbor's eyes lit up as she stared at the old tree standing in front of her. Qiuqiu, why is this tree so strange? Chapter 22:35. She had released so many 5 spirit talismans just now, causing the entire building, oh, no, the ground to collapse. But this tree was actually safe and sound. She didn't believe that there was nothing strange about it. Master, I can't tell what's wrong with this tree either. But since it can block spiritual sense and spiritual energy, then let's leave it here. If we plant it on Paradise Planet, won't it affect the spirit domain? It won't. Qiuqiu had a, I'm the boss, if it dares to act rashly, tone. It snorted and said, if it dares to mess around, I'll eat it. Arbor thought that its seed fragments were very powerful and naturally believed that it wasn't boasting when it said that it would eat this shielding tree. Alright then, you can transplant it in. Arbor nodded and said. Although she didn't know what use this strange shielding tree had for her, since Qiuqiu wanted to plant it on Paradise Planet, it should have its reasons. Arbor still didn't know that this shielding tree would help her greatly in the future. Right now, the little fellow was picking up everything as though it was picking up trash. It even instructed Qiuqiu to throw this tree further away so that it wouldn't affect the peach tree. Our old shielding tree is called the shielding tree. It told me just now that it's called the essence concealing tree. Qiuqiu's tone was slightly helpless. Master, this essence concealing tree can grow. If our spirit domain transforms into a god domain in the future, maybe the essence concealing tree can also block other people's divine power and spiritual consciousness. Arbor? What use was that? Seeing that she didn't understand, Qiuqiu couldn't help but cough lightly and continue, Master, you still don't understand. If we plant such a essence concealing tree in our sect in the future, other people won't have any spiritual energy if they attack our sect. What's the point of fighting? Arbor couldn't help but snicker. Are you joking? If you plant this lousy tree in the sect, then won't Senior Sister and the others still live? Aren't their spiritual energy and spiritual consciousness also blocked? Qiuqiu. Heavens, little Master was too stupid. Qiuqiu's saliva was about to dry up from explaining. Master. Since it's in our hands, it naturally has to listen to Qiuqiu's orders. If I tell it to block it, it will block it. If I don't tell it to block it, will it dare to? Arbor finally understood, and his eyes could not help but light up slightly. He stretched out his hand and summoned the little Traiant from Paradise Planet. Holding it in his hand, he looked at it with a pleasant expression and said, in that case, if this tree is placed in the sect in the future, it can be used as a divine guardian tree. Yes. Qiuqiu nodded heavily. When the time comes, we only need to break off half of its main branch and transplant it. Once it's fully grown, it'll definitely be able to shield everything within 100 kilometers. Then how do we make it recognize friend and foe? Arbor asked suspiciously. Actually, it's quite simple. As long as you cut off a small piece of its stem, boil it in water, and drink a small cup of it, you'll be able to make the essence-concealing tree treat you as one of us within a month. Drinking a cup every month is that simple. It's that simple. Arbor nodded happily. That's great. Hurry and move it away. Chiu danced and shook in her palm before jumping down from her fingers. Its entire slender little body emitted bits of green light. It didn't take much effort at all. In just a short moment, the entire heavy crooked tree began to tremble. Whoosh! Chapter 2236. After a burst of green light flashed, the entire old tree was sucked into Paradise Planet by Chiu. All that was left was... Ah! With a furious cry, Guan Zhaotang fell from the tree that had suddenly disappeared and landed heavily on the ground with his head facing down. Guan Zhaotang was truly a little dazed from the fall. His head knocked heavily on the ground, instantly leaving a bloody mark. He roared as he raised his head, his entire person in a very sorry state. His eyes, which were already severely injured, were now bleeding profusely. Arbor didn't care about Guan Zhaotang's roar at all. Her line of sight fell on a tree pit in front of her. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was a windfall. After the essence-concealing tree was moved into Paradise Planet by Chiu, an extremely deep pit was revealed. A burst of glaring light dazzled Arbor's eyes. Mo Lian's figure flashed, arriving beside Arbor. The young couple looked into the tree pit at the same time, their gazes fixed on the pieces of crystals scattered in the pit. There were all kinds of crystals used for refining tools, forging stones, and so on. There were all kinds of colors and all kinds of materials. In addition, there were also many mystic beast and spirit beast cores, big and small. Every piece was thrown into the tree pit, circulating with a faint light. Whoosh! Arbor blinked and looked up. A small red copper cauldron appeared in front of them, spinning back and forth in midair without any warning, just like an excited child who had seen a lot of snacks, so happy that he was about to fall down. Arbor looked up and silently exchanged glances with Mo Lian. Prince Mo couldn't help but say, it's rare to see the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron so energetic. Looks like it's the pile of food that has piqued its interest. That's right. Arbor looked speechlessly at Mo Lian. With a wave of her small hand, she grabbed the small red copper cauldron without any explanation. At this time, the 2 stars on the cauldron's body had already lit up. The entire red copper cauldron was translucent and beautiful like colored glass. At this moment it was spinning around Xiao Mu's palm like an impatient child, waiting for its little master to feed it. Arbor held the small red cauldron and simply jumped into the tree pit. He casually took out a red Xian beast crystal core and fed it. The cauldron fire within the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron spontaneously ignited without any wind. The faint cauldron fire instantly burned the Xian beast crystal core into liquid and absorbed it cleanly in an instant. Arbor fed the small cauldron several crystal cores and more than 10 different types of crystals and forging stones. The small cauldron absorbed it very quickly, and in less than a second, it would turn it into liquid and absorb it. Arbor couldn't help but sigh when he saw this. He muttered to himself, this glutton, I wonder how much he needs to eat to raise the 3rd star. The little fellow simply squatted down, holding the small cauldron and feeding it for several minutes. Only when the flame within the small cauldron changed from a very pure red to a faint glass color did she stop, somewhat astonished. Lian, quickly come and see. Mo Lian simply jumped into the pit filled with all kinds of crystals and crystal cores. She came to Arbor's side and helplessly pulled him up. What's wrong, my Jojo? Did you see? The color of the flame actually changed. Mo Lian nodded. Didn't you say that when the 2nd star rises, this cauldron's refining speed will double? Arbor vigorously nodded. That's right. Chapter 2237. Then perhaps when the third or even fourth star is ignited, this medicine cauldron's cauldron fire will also undergo some fundamental changes. Arbor cheered and suddenly jumped onto Mo Yen, hugging her as he exclaimed, the cauldron fire will be even purer in the future, right? In that case, I'll be able to effortlessly refine pills of exceptional quality in the future. There would be no need to constantly control the heat like when refining medicine in a small saucepan. Refining medicine in the future would only be more convenient and faster. Thinking of this, Arbor's little face was filled with excitement. He reached out to grab a handful of refining materials and threw them into the small cauldron. He looked kindly at the small cauldron and urged, hurry up and eat. Mo Yen couldn't help but want to laugh. This little rascal had just complained that the medicine cauldron had a big appetite and ate too much. Now that he knew that the cauldron fire would improve as it rose in stars, he acted out of character and urged the medicine cauldron to eat more. What a realistic little rascal. All right. Mo Yen helplessly picked up the little thing. Take these things back to Paradise Planet and let Chiochio slowly feed the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron. I don't think this little cauldron can eat too much at once. What if it has indigestion after eating too much? Wouldn't that still be a waste? Upon hearing this, Xiao Mu instantly felt that it was reasonable. Hence, she put away all the various materials she had buried inside the tree pit. What's that? Arbor stood at the edge of the giant pit with a curious expression. He poked his head out to look at an oval-shaped bead the size of a pigeon's egg that was quietly lying at the bottom of the pit, emitting a faint purple glow. Mo Yen reached out and sucked the oval-shaped bead into her palm. The two lowered their heads and studied it carefully. Arbor even reached out to poke the light purple bead. The surface of the bead softly caved in from her gentle poke. The two looked at each other, unable to figure out what it was. This could be an egg. Mo Yen pondered for a long time before speaking hesitantly. Arbor's expression of, can it be eaten, made Prince Mo want to laugh. Why was this little rascal's expression so funny? We don't know anything about it, so it's better if we don't eat it. Woof 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 woof. 3 puppies suddenly jumped out of Paradise Planet and stared at the egg in Arbor's hand with drooling faces. They ran around her feet with their tails between their legs. What is this? Arbor asked expressionlessly. Woof, woof woof woof. Woof your sister. Arbor pushed aside one of the puppies that was pouncing on him. Woof woof, woof woof woof. The 3 puppies kept circling around Arbor's feet. 3 pairs of pitiful eyes looked at her pleadingly. Their drooling expressions were simply too much. Arbor squatted down again, picked up a small puppy and asked, what is this? Idiot. That's the holy beast mantis egg. Do you want to throw it to the 3 little grass dogs? What is it? Arbor heard Chishua's exasperated yelling and couldn't help but call him out. A little fire phoenix was flapping its wings in front of her. It glared disdainfully at Prince Mo, who had been innocently attacked. Ignorant. Prince Mo, ? Jojo didn't recognize what it was either. Why was he scolding him? What egg? Arbor asked curiously. Chishua had the urge to vomit blood. He yelled in exasperation, hurry up and look in that pit again. They should have appeared as a pair. There should be 2 eggs in this pit. Chapter 2238. Woof. It's under that wolf's paw. The blazing blood fire phoenix exclaimed. Quick. Arbor's scalp went numb from the blazing blood fire phoenix's surprised cry. She hurriedly flew over and brushed aside a little puppy. Sure enough, she managed to save a black pigeon egg from its paw. The 2 eggs were placed side by side. One was light purple while the other was black. The blazing blood fire phoenix flapped its little wings and flew above the two eggs for a while before landing steadily on Arbor's shoulder. It looked at its little master with a look of disappointment. You almost lost two sacred beast eggs. Arbor, how would she know what sacred beast eggs these two pigeon egg-like things were? To be honest, she was still wondering if she should roast the light purple egg to see if it could be eaten. You want to roast the phoenix again? This heartless little fellow. When she first saw him, she also wanted to roast him. The little fire phoenix's accusatory expression made Arbor feel a little guilty for no reason. Stubbornly, he defended himself. Nonsense. When did I say I wanted to roast an egg to eat? I don't even have time to eat the eggs, duck eggs, and goose eggs in Taoyuan. Why would I eat such a small pigeon egg? Do you know that this pair is phoenix eggs? Arbor, phoenix eggs are as small as pigeon eggs. Who are you kidding? Mo Lien coughed lightly. She raised her hand and put it around Jojo's shoulder. She nodded and said, "Of course I know." The blazing blood fire phoenix threw the two of them a disdainful look. Pooh, their expressions just now clearly showed that they didn't know what these two eggs were. Our phoenix clan has many branches. For example, Qing Wan. You know Qing Wan, right? It's also a branch of our phoenix clan. It's just that its bloodline is a little distant. It hasn't reached the standard of a sacred beast. This pair of Taoists is also a branch of our phoenix clan. They're pure-blooded Taoists. Their bloodline is very pure. You almost fed them to the little one just now. Milk. Dog. Arbor, cough. Arbor almost couldn't look straight at the blazing blood fire phoenix's accusatory eyes. The little fellow immediately raised her head and glared at her husband angrily. Her husband is so talented and knowledgeable. How can he not recognize the phoenix eggs? Mo Lien was once again implicated innocently, and he put on an aggrieved and innocent face for his wifey to see. Please, he had only seen the beautiful figure of a fully formed phoenix in ancient books. Which ancient book would freaking draw two eggs? Woof, woof. Seeing that the phoenix egg in their mouths was about to fly away, the three puppies anxiously circled around Xiao Mu's feet. Scram! Xiao Mu was furious. Just now, when she saw the little puppy's watery and greedy expression, she really almost cough. Sin. But these three little puppies. Previously, he had been fighting over the two-headed flood dragon's sacred beast crystal core. Now, he actually wanted to eat the two sacred beast phoenixes. It really only ate holy beasts. What kind of taste is this? Isn't it a little too strong? Arbor silently put away the two eggs and stuffed them into his inner world. He looked back and couldn't help but exclaim, Guan Zhaotang ran away. Everyone's attention was on the tree pit. They were packing up the forging materials and tossing the phoenix eggs. They didn't expect Guan Zhaotang to take the opportunity to run away. Mo Lien curled her lips. Run. He doesn't know how to run. As they spoke, they heard the sound of hurried footsteps spreading over. Sleep tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Chapter 2239. With disheveled hair and bloodshot eyes, Guan Zhaotang led thousands of Ani prefecture guards back and roared. Capture them alive. Guan Zhaotang's hands were still bound by the spirit-binding rope, and his old face was flushed red. He was quite angry at the moment, and he mobilized all the people he could mobilize in Ani prefecture. All the guards rushed toward the Tower of Wonders in large numbers. Their shiny blades were especially bright in the night. Young people, you'll suffer if you're so arrogant and don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Guan Zhaotang raised his hands and roared angrily. Mo Lien pulled Arbor to her side and looked at Guan Zhaotang with raised eyebrows. Aren't you overconfident? You want to keep us here with just these few people? The crown prince couldn't help but snort and wave his hand lightly. In the blink of an eye, Guan Zhaotang led thousands of people in neat attire and rushed over from all directions. The empty space was quickly filled with people, and the roof beams were also filled with archers with bows and arrows in their hands, ready for battle. Guan Zhaotang opened his mouth, but suddenly felt as if his voice was stuck in his throat. For a moment, he was speechless. You guys. These bastards who deserve to be hacked to death by 1,000 blades. Were they planning to flatten his Anyi prefecture with their troops? Time was short, and Guan Zhaotang couldn't mobilize more people. In fact, if he was given enough time, not to mention a few thousand people, he could even dispatch tens of thousands of people from all over the place. But now that everything was a bit too late. Guan Zhaotang felt that he had overused his spiritual sense, and his vision started to blur. The last thing he saw seemed to be that man waving his hand with a cold expression. A group of black-clothed youths surrounded him and started fighting with the Anyi prefecture guards. The clanging of swords and sabers rang in his ears. Guan Zhaotang's dizzy body swayed, then swayed again. Suddenly, he was startled to hear a beast roar. He subconsciously opened his hand and released his contract beast. Unfortunately, his spirit beast had just been released and didn't have time to see the other person's figure before it was pushed to the ground and bitten by a snow-white ball. Guan Zhaotang collapsed to the ground. The spirit beast was heavily injured, causing his body to suffer a huge backlash. At this moment, he could no longer see anything. He only felt a huge object pressing down on his body. He struggled to straighten his body and yelled at the top of his lungs, "Come quickly." Before he could say the word human, he felt his head being slapped by a powerful claw. He spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot, and his body collapsed weakly. The snow leopard on top of Guan Zhaotang rubbed its bloody claws against Guan Zhaotang's clothes in disgust to wipe away the blood on its claws. Arbor slowly walked over. Tong and his men, who were fighting fiercely, couldn't help but pick up their opponents and spread out to the sides, making a path for her to pass through. The guards of Anyi prefecture felt more and more apprehensive as they fought. These black-clothed youths, who looked like heavenly soldiers, were all agile and vigorous. The more they fought, the braver they became. Most of the contracted beasts they summoned were also spirit beasts. Many of them were even better equipped than the people of Anyi prefecture. How could they continue fighting like this? Those who surrender will have a way to live. Chapter 2240. Anyone who resists will be executed on the spot, Tong ordered coldly. The group of black-clothed youths raised their weapons and carried out the purge with grim expressions. As more and more people died in Anyi prefecture, more and more guards chose to put down the butcher's knife in their hands and submit like shrimps. Guan Yisang, who was hiding behind a pillar at the corner of the corridor, covered her mouth with her hands. She leaned back slightly and took a few quiet breaths. Then, she hurriedly turned around and ran back to her courtyard. Guan Yisang ran back to her courtyard and suddenly raised her head to the sky and laughed. Concubine Jiang walked out. When she saw her daughter like this, she couldn't help but ask in surprise, "What's going on outside, Bo? Mother. Let's go. We're leaving right now." Guan Yisang helped her mother up and walked outside. "Don't worry about it. This family offended a powerful faction. It's completely over." "What?" Concubine Jiang was shocked. She quickly grabbed her daughter's arm. "What's going on? Bo, hurry and tell mother." "There's no time, mother. We have to leave this damned place first." Guan Yisang was completely disappointed in this family. Even if she had to give up everything and leave with her mother, she wouldn't hesitate. In any case, everyone in this family was a stranger. Other than her mother, no one treated her sincerely. Since that was the case. Bang! A stumbling figure slammed open the door of their house. Madame Hua's tear-stained face appeared in front of them. Sixth Miss. Take me with you, Sixth Miss. The outside world was in a state of chaos. The concubines and concubines of Ani Prefecture, who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken, usually lived like princes. When had they ever encountered such a situation? Every one of them only knew how to cry and yell whenever they encountered trouble. The servants and maidservants took the opportunity to steal a lot of wealth. They didn't care if their masters lived or died. They only cared about finding a place to escape. Madame Hua's 2 personal maidservants also took their things and ran away. Madame Hua, this delicate and delicate beauty, immediately became flustered and didn't know what to do. Big sister Lei Feng, please take me with you, I beg you. Madame Hua held a bundle in her hands and ran to their side with a face full of panic as she cried out. Guan glanced at Madame Hua, then suddenly chopped at the back of her neck with a karate chop. Madame Hua's eyes widened in shock, and she fell down along the wall. Guan forcefully snatched the cloth bag from her arms and opened it. Seeing that there were quite a few crystal cores and spirit coins inside, she hurriedly put them into her inner world. Bo fu, Concubine Jiang trembled as she asked, You doing this, isn't it not too good? The strong prey on the weak, and the fittest survive. This is the truth. Guan Yiba raised her fist and coldly glanced at Madame Hua on the ground. This woman took advantage of the caretaker Hall's favor and gave you a lot of trouble. Now, she's just retribution for her actions. Mother, don't be soft-hearted. Let's go. Concubine Jiang sighed, then nodded and followed her daughter out. She subconsciously looked back at Madame Hua, who had collapsed inside the door. A person's fate really wasn't up to them at all. Mother, don't worry. We'll definitely live a better life after leaving the Guan family. Chapter 2242. Arbor. Mo Lien couldn't help but want to laugh out loud. She looked at Arbor meaningfully. My Joe, I didn't expect you to have such a bad taste. Did you do this? Tower of Punishment. It's the same name as the Tower of Punishment set up by the Heavenly Tao. The whole thing was a knockoff. Arbor. Thank you, but I don't have the time to do this nonsense. This Chocho really has nothing better to do. Wake him up. Looking at Guan Zhaotang, who didn't have a single good piece of flesh on his body, Arbor inexplicably sympathized with this guy. Okay, my beautiful little master. As you wish. A big smile appeared on Debeo's metal-black face. Splash. That guy casually picked up a ladle of salt water and poured it over him. Judging from his skillful movements and style, this wasn't the first time he had done something like this. Guan Zhaotang woke up with a shrill scream. The wounds all over his body were soaked in salt water, and his muscles were trembling. He clenched his teeth and endured great pain. Arbor shrunk his body. Mo Lien glared at the golem in annoyance. You scared my Jojo. Debeo listlessly took 2 steps back. He twiddled his fingers and said timidly, Master, I'll be gentler next time. After Guan Zhaotang stopped trembling for a while, he finally calmed down. Arbor then stretched out his hand, and a small purple medicine bottle appeared on his palm. Hand over a strand of your spiritual consciousness. Take this medicine and become my servant. Don't even think about it. Guan Zhaotang clenched his teeth and said with a trembling body. Don't even think about it. Arbor glanced at him coldly. Do you know what's more terrifying than death? Guan Zhaotang's heart trembled for some reason, and he stood there in a daze. It's the painful feeling of not being able to die even if you want to. Arbor said coldly. His dark eyes looked at Guan Zhaotang faintly. I'll give you another chance to choose. Guan Zhaotang was not the kind of iron-blooded man he thought he was. In fact, he had already admitted defeat in his heart. Now that he was frightened by Arbor, he hurriedly lowered his head and quickly took out a strand of spiritual sense from his conscience and handed it to Arbor. Arbor stored it in a storage talisman. He then asked Debao to take out a poison pill from the medicine bottle and stuffed it into the caretaker Hall's mouth. Only then did he nod in relief. Mo Lien looked down at her and couldn't help but reach out to pat her little head. His little fellow was so cautious. She didn't think it was safe to just take the person's spiritual sense. In addition, she added a layer of poison to control the person's body. He really appreciated her approach. She was indeed his wife. This level of black-bellied was a tradition of the Mo family. Within 10 days, report all the forces in an E-prefecture to the Shantian Prefecture's prefecture lord. After throwing down this sentence, Xiaomu left on her own. There were no less than 3,000 an E-prefecture guards on the second floor. There was no need to go through so much trouble for them. He could just ask each of them to hand over a strand of spiritual sense. Arbor went down to the first floor and threw the storage talisman containing the spiritual sense of the 3,000 an E-prefecture guards to Guan Zhaotang. Give this to the Shantian Prefecture's prefecture lord for safekeeping. In the future, just listen to his orders and do as he says. Dun Zhong, this guy, you have to take good care of the 6 prefectures. Don't let me down. Arbor muttered to himself. Chapter 2243. The two plucked some fresh oranges, pears, and other fruits and left Paradise Planet. Arbor patted her little head. Wait for me. She entered Paradise Planet again and handed a pair of bite and eggs to little Water Child. She stroked its head and said, help me find a good place with dense spiritual energy and take good care of them. Okay. Little Water Child wrapped the 2 phoenix eggs in a mist and nodded repeatedly. Ignoring the 3 puppies who were pouncing and barking, Arbor roared at the 3 puppies, you're not allowed to eat. Woo, woo woo. The 3 puppies actually rolled around on the ground. This was too human-like. Arbor didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she looked at them. With a flip of her hand, she took out 3 bottles of shining medicinal liquid from her inner world and waved them in front of the 3 puppies. You're not allowed to have any ideas about the sacred beast eggs. This is for you to eat. Woof 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 woof. The 3 puppies rubbed against her feet and circled back and forth a few times. Each of them used their little paws to grab a bottle of medicinal liquid and frolicked to the side. Arbor shook her head speechlessly. She called Chio over and instructed it, mainly to keep an eye on the puppies so they wouldn't secretly eat the phoenix eggs. When she flashed out again, she saw that Hu Jinshan, little Taisui, and the others had already returned. Dao Wuji waved his hand at Arbor and said with a smile, little sister-in-law, everyone in Ani Prefecture has either run or scattered. Most of them have fled. Arbor nodded and had Chio knock out caretaker Tang and the 3,000 Ani Prefecture guards before throwing them out. Little Taisui suddenly frowned and looked up at the sky. 2 powerful auras are coming. Everyone's expressions became vigilant. In less than a second, 2 white-haired elders stepped on the black curtain and quickly moved over. In a flash, they arrived in front of Arbor and the others. Chio waved its small branch and chuckled as it hit Caretaker Tang several times. Caretaker Tang suddenly woke up with a start. When he looked up and saw the 2 Ani Prefecture consecrators descending, he almost cried out for help in joy. But at that moment, he felt an inexplicable pain in his mind. When he looked up at the ebony talisman in Arbor's hand, Guan Zhaotang's mind suddenly became clear. He rushed over with tears in his eyes and cried at the feet of the 2 consecrators, seniors, you came at the right time. The powerful enemy has already been driven away by our friends. Seniors, please chase after them in that direction. The 2 Ani Prefecture consecrators frowned slightly and looked in the direction the caretaker hall was pointing. Why didn't he sense anyone's aura there? Their gazes swept across Arbor's group, and they were slightly shocked. The group of young men and women in front of them looked very young, but they couldn't see through the cultivation of quite a few of them. The 2 consecrators nodded at the Hall of Care, and without saying a word, they chased in the direction he pointed. Seeing that they had walked far away, Xiao Mu and the others finally let down their guard. Xiao Mu gazed coldly at Guan Zhaotang. "Do as I said just now." "Yes." Guan Zhaotang lowered his head. According to this young lady's meaning, Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture lord should also be one of her people. He really didn't expect that two of the most powerful territories among the 6 prefectures had already fallen into the hands of this unknown young lady. What a formidable character. Guan Zhaotang took a deep breath and then slowly closed his eyes. Since things had gotten to this point, he could only take things one step at a time. Chapter 2244. Divine Prefecture. In the Qin Estate's Xiangxin Lake, there was a row of winding corridors that were carved with colored glass roofs and carved with crystals. Under the illumination of the sunlight, the corridors were dazzling and sparkling with rainbow-colored glaze. There were small windows in the corridors. Looking out from each window, one could see a different scenery. There was an outstandingly beautiful tree that poked out from the eaves and a mossy stone wall that was covered by the snow. There were pavilions, terraces, and pagodas, forming a moving picture scroll. At first glance, the scenery was sparse, and the pavilions, terraces, and pagodas each had their own beauty. There was a smile on the woman's lips. She held an extremely exquisite red cedar wood tray in her hands as she gracefully passed through the dazzling corridors and entered the Huiji Pavilion in the middle of the Xiangxin Lake. Under the silver-pink chest wrap, her slender waist was bundled up high. Below it was a pomegranate skirt made of flowing sand. A jade gourd bell was tied to a belt of the same color. As she walked, the crisp sound of the bell rang out along with the sound of the wind. The pearl hairpin on her head swayed, and green pearls twined around it. The most conspicuous item was a 5-fortune jade hairpin inlaid with large pearls. Under the sunlight, it emitted a dazzling luster. When Shi Yongqian entered the Huiji Pavilion, she deliberately slowed down her steps. The smile on her lips gradually deepened. Her pair of beautiful eyes lingered on the young man in the pavilion. Taking a deep breath, she walked in with her 2 maids. Inside the Huiji Pavilion, a tall and slender man in a purple robe was sitting on one side of a pillar. A book was spread out on his knees. One hand was supporting his forehead on the arched railing, and the other hand was casually swinging by his side. Even though he was asleep, this man's brows were still lightly furrowed. Shi Yongqian walked over with small steps. Just as she reached out her hand, she wanted to soothe the melancholy between his brows. But with a flash of cold light, the man had already opened his eyes. His gaze coldly fell on her body, and a dark green light flashed in his eyes. Ah! Shi Yongqian's hand trembled, and the tray she was holding immediately fell to the ground with a clang. The white jade porcelain cup on top of it shattered into pieces with a bang. "Ah, miss!" The 2 maids hurriedly ran forward and supported the falling Shi Yongqian. The man gently retracted the dagger in his hand and returned it to its scabbard before putting it back into his wide sleeves. That pair of abnormally cold eyes swept over Shi Yongqian without any warmth, and there was a trace of impatience between his brows. "Wang Chung!" A cold voice rang out. A black figure instantly landed beside him and knelt on one knee. "Wang Chung is here. Take those traitorous bastards out and kill them." The man said coldly, "Don't let me see them again." "Yes." Outside Huiji Pavilion, the cries of a few men and women could be heard. Someone knelt down with a plop and shouted towards Huiji Pavilion, "Young master, please spare my life, please spare my life." Ah! After a few screams, the saber wind disappeared into the air. After that, there were no more piercing noises. Shi Yongqian bit her lips, her entire body trembling. You. Second young master, you're too unreasonable." One of the maids couldn't help but cry out. "Our miss was kind enough to send you lotus seed soup. It's fine if you don't appreciate it, but you even humiliated Miss like this. You. Shi Yongqian covered her face and sobbed. Ah, Xian, what's wrong with you? Ever since you came back half a year ago, to me, you. Young Master Omega Kotoku's entire body trembled. Chapter 2245. That memory appeared clearly in his mind again. Xian, you can't have really fallen in love with that woman and want to marry her, right? Xian, say something. Tisk, she's just a little pet that I'm raising. If it were you, would you marry your own pet? Don't say it, don't say it. Don't call me that. Don't call me Xian. Disgusting, it's disgusting just hearing it. The second young master's picturesque features completely contorted. He suddenly reached out his hand and forcefully waved it. Slap. Ah. Shi Yongqian's eyes widened in horror. She held her swollen left cheek with one hand and stared at the Omega Kotoku young master in front of her with an expression of disbelief. Second young master, what happened to second young master? Why did he seem like a completely different person? His vicious aura was so heavy. Scram! Scram immediately! Qin Xian roared angrily and flung away the servant girl's hand that was grabbing his sleeve. When the two servant girls saw their young miss being humiliated, their hearts were about to shatter. They cried out while weeping, "Second young master, how can you treat our young miss like this? Have you completely forgotten that you still have an engagement with our young miss?" Scram! Qin Xian roared angrily. His vicious aura erupted like a tidal wave. Ah! Shi Yongqian was flung to the ground by his vicious aura. She turned her head to look at him and cried out sorrowfully, Xian, what happened to you? You slut, it's all because of you. It's all because of you that she's been tortured so miserably. That's why she's doing everything she can to escape from me. A trace of murderous intent flashed through Qin Xian's eyes. He suddenly raised his hand and purple lightning flashed between his fingers. Spirit lightning. The servant girl cried out in alarm, her complexion becoming incomparably pale. Kill her. Kill her and end everything. Qin Xian's eyes flashed with a vicious light. Shi Yongqian was scared silly by this gaze. She sat on the ground in a daze and looked up at her beloved man with tears streaming down her face. Was he going to kill her mercilessly? Stop! The Qin estate's patriarch, who had rushed over after hearing the news, hastily flew into the Huiji pavilion. He slapped his son's handsome face and cursed loudly, "Bastard, what kind of madness are you having? Why aren't you collecting your thoughts and apologizing to Miss Shi?" Omega Kotoku raised the back of his hand and touched his slightly painful face. He looked at his father coldly. Hee. A deep laugh came from outside the Huiji pavilion. Omega Kotoku looked up and saw his elder brother leaning against a pillar, looking at him with a smile. Qin Xian, that fellow, had never been proper. She was only wearing a thin spring shirt in the middle of winter, revealing more than half of her chest. There was a dot of cinnabar between his eyebrows. Against his snow-white skin, it looked exceptionally beautiful. His seductive eyes were seductive as he looked seductively at Miss Shi who was sitting on the ground. "Aya, my younger brother, you really don't know how to have tender feelings for the fairer sex. Ah, Miss Shi, quickly let me see if you're injured." Eldest young Sir Qin walked over with his clothes fluttering in the wind. Along the way, his handsome appearance made the two weak servant girls swoon, their faces flushed red. Eldest young Sir bent over and smilingly helped Miss Shi up from the ground. Shi Yongqian's face inexplicably reddened. She only glanced at this evildoer in front of her before hastily averting her gaze. How pitiful! Such a beautiful face has been beaten red. Chapter 2246. Eldest young Sir went from bad to worse. He lifted Shi Yongqian's face with his finger and lightly blew on it. It doesn't hurt anymore, it doesn't hurt anymore. Shi Yongqian's heart started pounding wildly uncontrollably. Sigh. Eldest young Sir Qin released his grip on Miss Shi's chin and turned around with a grin. He muttered softly, I thought his charm had declined, but it turns out it hasn't. Look, which woman wasn't head over heels for him? Even this Shi Yongqian, who adored second brother wholeheartedly, was bewitched to the point that her heart swayed and her mind wandered with a curl of his finger. Except for the little stoic. It seemed like other than the little stoic, she could casually snatch away second brother's things. How boring. Also, did the little stoic really belong to second brother? That didn't seem to be the case either. How vexing. Just thinking about that stoic face gave him a headache. What should he do? Eldest young Sir instantly lost his playfulness and walked to the side to sit down. He folded his slender legs and watched this father-son quarrel scene with waning interest. My son has been impolite. Family head Qin cupped his hands at Shi Yongqian. Family head Qin's 50-something-year-old face was more solemn and cold than Qin Guilu's, and his expression was very rigid. Shi Yongqian wiped her tears and secretly peeked at the expressionless Omega Kotoku young Sir. She couldn't help but feel exasperated. Although Omega Kotoku treated her very coldly before, he at least maintained his courteous appearance on the surface. Unlike now, when he viewed her as an enemy. When he flew into a rage just now, it seemed like he really wanted to kill her. Miss Shi, I'm truly sorry. My son was seriously injured half a year ago, and he hasn't fully recovered yet. Sometimes, he might not be clear-headed, so please don't blame him, Miss Shi. Shi Yongqian wiped her tears and said delicately, Uncle Qin, I won't blame second young Sir. I know that he was just momentarily distracted. Yes, he might have misunderstood me, that's why. I don't have any misunderstandings about you. Young Sir Omega Kotoku coldly interrupted her. Shi Yongqian, you better not appear in front of me in the future. Otherwise, I really might not be able to control myself and kill you. Family head Qin. Shi Yongqian, sob, Uncle Qin. Unfilial son. Family head Qin cursed. What are you saying? You and Qian have been engaged since you were young. You little bastard, apologize to Qian, immediately. We'll get married in 3 months. Pooh. Eldest young Sir Qin laughed gracefully on the side. I say, second brother, the wedding was supposed to be half a year later, but because of your actions, it's been brought forward by 3 months. Congratulations, congratulations. Congratulations to second brother for bringing home the beauty. As eldest young master spoke, he did not forget to throw a wink at his future sister-in-law. Shi Yongqian's heart began to beat wildly as she thought to herself, could it be that the eldest young master is interested in me as well? Ah, what should he do? There was only one Qian, and she had already given her heart to the second young master. It was impossible for her to have any relationship with the first young master. Eldest young master, that's hilarious. Ha 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 ha. Seeing his second brother suffer in pain, eldest young master felt elated. He was so happy. If eldest Qin could hear Shi Yongqian's fluttering heart right now, he would definitely roar with laughter. Heavens, this Miss Shi was truly a drama queen and a narcissist. He was just casually teasing this woman, and he liked her. He was really laughing at her face. What a ridiculous woman. The 8th watch ended. Chapter 2248. Nether Province. 15 kilometers outside of Great Yong City. Nightfall. The cry of an eagle filled the sky. The vigorous Eagle King flew over from afar with a group of people on its back, flying at an abnormally fast speed. After flying non-stop for a day and a night, everyone was a little tired. After discussing, they pressed down on the eagle and dismounted. 13 or 14 people filed off the eagle's back. They found a clean place, gathered in a circle, and started a small fire. So tired. After rushing all the way, Akira's small face was almost devoid of spirit. At this moment, she was half-bent and lightly pounding her sore legs and shoulders with her fists. Naturally, Ali was in the same situation as him. However, he was a man who cared a lot about his reputation. No matter how tired he was, he wouldn't be like Akira, pounding here and there as if no one else was around and constantly complaining that he was tired. Don't worry, Mississippi. We will enter the capital in about 4 to 6 hours. The one who spoke was an old man who chuckled as he poked at the fire in front of him. Let's rest here for the night and leave tomorrow morning, ACI said with a heavy expression. Yes. Everyone took out rice and vegetables from their inner worlds and started to stew dinner. ACI didn't say much and left the group alone. He walked to the side and looked up at the bright crescent moon under the night sky. Brother ACI, here. Akira walked to his side with a smile and handed him a rabbit leg. ACI glanced at it, took it, and sat down under a tree. Brother ACI, what are you thinking about? Akira asked with a smile as she sat down next to him. Nothing. ACI didn't have any intention of chatting with her. He tore into the rabbit meat in his hand and replied indifferently. Now that Brother ACI has returned to Nether Province, you can naturally get back at him for the grievances you suffered, Akira said. Akira chattered, especially. Not long ago, when Big Brother ACI returned to the tribe, he was hunted down by Northern Mo's crown prince for thousands of miles and almost lost his life. Speaking of this, Akira became angry. At that time, the three of them had led hundreds of guards back to the Aikido tribe. Along the way, they encountered people sent by Northern Prince Mo, who chased and intercepted them. Akira gritted her teeth in anger at the thought that she had almost lost her life on the road. Now that we have returned to the underworld region, we can deal with that arrogant man. It's also good to send more people back and destroy his small kingdom of Northern Mo. ACI glanced at her and snorted. Northern Mo's sky is currently surrounded by talisman arrays. Ordinary people simply can't return. Then we're just going to suffer like this? Akira was so angry that she clenched her fists. Back then, Northern Prince Mo had really sent people to hunt them down. From the moment they left Northern Mo city, they chased them all the way to the Aikido tribe. This perseverance was simply amazing. What do you know? Yasi fidgeted with his hair. If it wasn't for the fact that the dual-star immortal spirit bracelets had angered Prince Mo, nothing would have happened. Northern Prince Mo isn't that simple. He's just the crown prince of a small kingdom in the lower star domain. What does he have that Brother ACI is afraid of? Akira snorted. He's not the crown prince of some small Northern Mo kingdom. ACI leaned against a tree and looked up at the dark sky. He said coldly, that's the crown prince of the divine province. Akira, you are too ignorant. Akira's eyes instantly widened in disbelief. Chapter 2249. When Arbor woke up naturally, she was informed by Mo Lien that the 10,000 jade slips had arrived. The little fellow naturally went out to look at her blank jade slips happily. She took a piece and looked at it. The thin jade slips had an extremely transparent color and were just right for making jade talismans. Prince Mo stood beside her with a smile and asked, how about these blank jade slips? If they're still too thick, we can get them to work on them a little more. Very good. Arbor nodded vigorously and kept the boxes of jade slips of the same size and thickness into her inner world. I'm very satisfied. The two of them were now standing in front of the mansion they just bought. The small mansion wasn't big and only had 2 courtyards. It was more than enough for the two of them to stay here in a low-key manner for a while. It didn't take much effort to move from the inn to this small mansion. The two black-hearted fellows had a tacit understanding and directly left the group of beautiful women that Mo Kun had sent over to the inn as cleaning maids. Putting it nicely, they had received a lot of care from the inn's owner during this period of time and left a few beauties behind as a token of respect. Those pitiful delicate beauties were left behind in the inn and had to serve tea and water every day. They had already cursed this crown prince 18 times in their hearts and regretted it so much. If they had known that this person was such a scammer, would they have fought so hard to get him? Arbor packed up dozens of boxes of blank jade slips and only took 100 of them back to her room to draw talismans. Among the talismans she had comprehended last time. Other than the doppelganger talisman that left a deep impression on her, there was also the drawing method of the ghost summon talisman. At this moment, she checked the remaining demonstration talismans. She took a talisman called the Soul Separation Talisman and looked at it repeatedly. This was so mysterious. This soul separation talisman could extract one's soul and release it outside to speed up the cultivation of spiritual sense or divine sense. This method was simply unheard of and unseen. However, according to the talisman's explanation, this kind of external spiritual sense cultivation speed would be very fast. It was just that. She recalled that her master had said that her soul was unstable and she couldn't help but feel a little hesitant. It was best to use the soul-leaving talisman with caution. The little fellow put away the soul-departing talisman demonstration talisman, lowered his head, and drew another dozen or so clone talismans. Only then did he put away the remaining blank jade slips with satisfaction, and happily looked at the dozen or so clone talismans he had just drawn. He raised his hand and touched the runes on it. Then, he happily went out to find Emolienne to tell her about his happiness. Now that she was a profound great talisman master, she was able to smoothly inscribe jade talismans, and the quality of the finished product looked very good. Emolienne saw her running out with several jade talismans in her hands. She couldn't help but take one out of curiosity. After looking at it carefully, she nodded and said, "How about I try it?" "All right." Arbor nodded and gave him a doppelganger talisman. Emolienne skillfully opened the talisman for her own use. A stream of talisman power suddenly entered his body. Instantly, he felt his body lighten. Two illusory shadows appeared beside him. As soon as Emolienne moved, the two afterimages also started brandishing their arms, smoothly executing a set of punches with the main body. After Emolienne blasted a palm at the stone block in front of her, the two shadows followed suit and blasted out a palm at the same time. 3 light forces landed on that stone block at the same time. Naturally, the stone block was blasted into pieces. Emolienne nodded and said, "How long can this doppelganger talisman last?" Chapter 2251. If nothing goes wrong, Dun Zong should be able to make it today. Emolienne held the little fellow's small hand as the two strolled leisurely along the street. It was really quite cold outside. Because of the light snowfall, there were still traces of snow on the treetops. Emolienne bent down to straighten the collar of the fire marten fur coat for her, and wrapped her cloak tighter around her. "It's not cold at all." Arbor looked up at him. However, Prince Emo felt that she was cold. When he held her small hand, he even wrapped a faint fire spirit around her to warm her. Along the way, although the cold wind whistled, the little fellow felt a little hot. She even wanted to take off her cloak. "It's cold." Emolienne reached out to help her tighten her collar, and reached out to carry her. "I'd better carry you. It's very cold." Arbor's small face reddened slightly as she turned sideways to avoid his embrace. She glared at him from the corner of her eyes. "Cold your head?" She still felt cold at her cultivation level. "You must be joking." Emolienne blinked. He didn't feel that he was taking advantage of his wife at all. Seeing that she wouldn't let him carry her, he looked at her pitifully and held her small hand. "I'm afraid that you'll catch a cold." "I'm not cold." Arbor huffed and glared at him from the corner of her eyes. She was already wrapped in a thick fire marten fur cloak. How could she still feel cold? To tell the truth, even if she didn't wrap it up and only wore a thin spring shirt, with her cultivation level, she couldn't possibly feel cold. Prince Mo resentfully retracted his hand. Oh. He secretly looked at his wife. Jojo, what has Second Uncle Master been busy with these 2 days? Second Uncle Master is preparing things to go to the Divine Continent. Mo Lien, what was there to prepare? After we're done with Ani Prefecture, we still have to return to Shantian Prefecture and take the little yellow crane with us. Arbor lowered her head in thought as she spoke. Mo Lien didn't comment. It was not a problem for Jojo to bring his family to Shenzhou. The problem was, what did Second Uncle have to prepare? Everyone had an inner world. What did the Divine Land not have? They had to replenish everything here. Second Martial Uncle heard that the prices in the Divine Land were particularly high, so he thought that if there was anything he could buy in Ani Prefecture, he would buy it first. Prince Mo looked confused. Are prices in Shenzhou very high? He didn't think so. Xiao, tell Martial Aunt not to worry about it. When she goes to the Divine Land, I guarantee that she will have nothing to worry about. She won't have to worry about anything. Arbor glanced at him. If Martial Uncle wants to prepare more, then let her be. Mo Lien nodded helplessly. While the two of them were chatting, they suddenly heard screams coming from the street in front of them. Oh my God, this ghost spirit is really fierce. How dare you show up in broad daylight? Taoist priest, be careful. Arbor and Mo Lien looked at each other and hurried over. They parted the crowd to take a look. They saw a familiar-looking Taoist priest flying to and fro in the middle of the crowd, leaping high and low. He held a peachwood sword in his hand and looked like he was going to fight ghosts. At first glance, his face was flushed red, like someone who was constipated. Arbor's mouth twitched silently. She recognized at a glance that this guy was the swindler Taoist priest she saw in Quoto village. His life was truly a struggle. He had traveled far and wide, causing a ruckus all the way to Ani Prefecture. Arbor looked at this Taoist priest awkwardly in the middle of the crowd, speechless for a moment. It was really a small world. She met this weird Taoist priest again. Chapter 2252. Everyone, get out of the way. This ghost spirit is extremely powerful. Don't let it collide with you. The Taoist priest shouted angrily. The bright flying sword in his hand started to spin as if it had a mind of its own. It fought back and forth with a wisp of black smoke in midair. Everyone stared blankly, clapping their hands and cheering. Arbor was speechless. She had already seen clearly that the Taoist priest was holding a strand of wild silk that ordinary people couldn't see clearly. He was using it to guide and control the flying sword as it danced up and down. From the looks of it, it looked like he was controlling the sword from a distance. He was very capable. After such an awkward performance, even Mo Lien felt that the guy was so embarrassed that she couldn't bear to watch it anymore. Unexpectedly, the Taoist priest actually flew into the air at the last moment as if he was holding onto the wisp of black smoke. He shouted, "Where do you think you're going?" Arbor was speechless. She really wanted to kill this Taoist priest who lied all the time. Tut! The Taoist priest spat out saliva and shouted angrily again. He pretended to fall with the wisp of black smoke and landed heavily on the ground. He wiped away the wisp of black smoke with 2 punches. The onlookers cheered and clapped after seeing such an exciting scene of the Taoist priest taming the ghost spirit. Arbor looked at her dear husband speechlessly. Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh. He held her little hand and squeezed it. He said softly, "Life isn't easy. Let him be." This was also how other people made a living. Arbor naturally wouldn't rashly expose that person. In any case, this drama queen had been jumping up and down for so long. This kind of physical work should at least be rewarded. But in reality, there really weren't many rewards. The Taoist priest begged for a round and only received 2 spirit coins pitifully. Arbor looked at his expression. He looked like he was about to cry. Clang! Arbor threw 10 spirit coins into the Taoist priest's begging box. The Taoist priest hurriedly turned his head to look. He saw a little girl dressed in red like a dazzling pearl, a ball of the most intense flame, looking at him expressionlessly. If she had some expression, it would be even more perfect. The Taoist priest thought. He rubbed his hands together and chuckled as he approached her. He bowed repeatedly and said, little girl, is that you? A little girl from Quoto village. The last time he saw her, it was still on the streets of Shuntian Prefecture. That little girl had such an exquisite and expressionless face, so it was naturally impossible to forget. Arbor glanced at him. How much foundation do you have in making talismans? The Taoist said with a bitter face, I don't have much of a foundation. When I was young, my master taught me for a while. But I don't know if it's because my aptitude is too low, but I can't learn most of it. Arbor shook his head. You can't learn it because your late master didn't teach you all the talismans he taught you. What you've learned are incomplete talisman techniques. I've met you 3 times since I was young. It can be considered fate. Arbor waved her hand and a thin book fell into the Taoist's hand. This is a part of the most basic talisman drawing methods for defense talismans, attack talismans, and body immobilization talismans. After you learn it, it shouldn't be much of a problem for you to deal with ordinary mid-level ghost spirits. In the future, you won't have to put on such an awkward act to make a living. The Taoist priest's mind was slightly agitated as he picked up the book and flipped through 2 pages. When he looked up again, he saw that the little stoic and the red-clothed man had walked far away, hand in hand. The Taoist priest hastily chased after them and repeatedly exclaimed, Miss, Master. Many thanks. At this time, the Taoist priest still didn't know what kind of earth-shaking changes this thin book would cause his life to undergo in the future. That I'm not going to sleep until I'm full. Chapter 2253. It seems like it's snowing a little again. Arbor reached out to catch a sparkling snowflake and looked up at Mo Lien. He held her little hand and took out a green paper umbrella from his inner world with his other hand to cover the 2 of them. He looked down at her and asked with a smile, Are you cold? Not cold at all. Good. My Jojo's body is the best. Mo Lien squeezed her little hand and stopped in front of a shop. Do you want to go in and take a look? Arbor looked up. The shop had a gold-plated signboard that said Talisman Shop, and it was crowded with people inside. The little fellow's interest was piqued. She had always wanted to know what the talisman crafting standards of each realm were like. Back on Sikong planet, only Mu Jingrue from a talisman patrician family caught her eye when it came to talisman crafting. Forget about the others. The little fellow excitedly walked in front, her little hand tightly holding onto Mo Lien who was following behind her. The crown prince slowly caught up. He slowly turned his head and glanced at the street corner. A severe glint flitted through his phoenix eyes. People came and went in the talisman shop. The buyers who passed by Arbor and Mo Lien holding an exquisite little box all had joyful expressions on their faces. Mo Lien reached out to pull down the little fellow's hat and took off her cloak, revealing a delicate little face. A delicate little face was revealed. It was fair and tender, and a pair of round eyes were looking at him. Phew, she's getting more and more beautiful. He still remembered the first time they met. The 7-year-old child was as skinny as a 5 or 6-year-old bean sprout. Under the nurturing of the sun, this little flower was quietly blooming in a graceful manner. He caressed her little face and smiled at her with slightly curved phoenix eyes. For a moment, the buyers who came and went in the shop were all attracted by the 2's elegant demeanor. Until, a yellow-grade defensive talisman array, everyone quickly come over and take a look. A shout came down from the railing on the second floor. The numerous buyers on the first floor raised their heads and looked over, only to see 128 yellow talisman papers arranged in front of the shop assistant, forming a defensive talisman array. This kind of defensive glyph formation can withstand attacks below the 4th level of the spirit realm for at least 5 minutes. This set of defensive array glyphs can be used more than 3 times. Until the talisman force completely disappeared. What is everyone hesitating for? The starting price is 8,000 spirit coins, and each increment is 100 spirit coins. If you want to buy it, you can start now, 8,100. 8,200. 8,500. Everyone raised their heads and pointed, whispering to each other. There was obvious excitement on their faces. Arbor was speechless as he looked at the defensive rune array made of yellow talisman paper. Was this the difference? Most of the talismans on the market were talisman papers. Even ebony talismans were rare. No, it should be said that he had never seen it before. Although jade talismans are rare, I've seen them once or twice. Could it be that the people of this world don't know about ebony when they craft talismans? Arbor felt that it was a bit laughable as he watched them fight over this set of defensive talisman arrays that were of little value. A yellow-grade defensive talisman array made of 128 yellow talismans. Could only defend for 5 minutes. What kind of joke was this? This set of defensive talisman arrays was made by Master Jiang Hong. That's amazing. I heard that the master worked his heart out for 3 months and finally completed the drawing of this set of talisman arrays. Xiao Mu only felt like a huge rock was crushing her small head to death.